Chapter 1337. Where exactly did you go? I thought you were dead. Tears rolled down her cheeks and landed on his shoulders as soon as she finished speaking. Mujie's whereabouts were really unknown in that car accident. She thought that he was no longer alive. Now that he was standing before her, alive and well, she was shocked, overjoyed, surprised, and emotional. Gong Jie's heart ached at the sight of her teardrops. He cupped her face lovingly and gently wiped away the tears from her eyes with his fair, jade-like fingertips. His thin lips trembled slightly as he said, "Sis, I'm sorry that I finally found you after searching for so long. I made you wait for me for so long." His tone was tinged with guilt as he hugged her and murmured softly, "Sis, I'm sorry." He thought that he had lost her too. That dusty memory was brushed away. After 15 years of separation, the two snuggled up to each other and hugged each other tightly. They were deeply moved by each other's presence. Gong Jie said faintly, "I miss you so much. Sis, I miss you." Gong Jie's deep, hoarse voice rang beside her ear. It was as seductive as an orchid. Mushi did not know what had happened. She walked up to Yun Shirshir and sized up the man standing before her warily. She still remembered how this man had gotten rid of a well-trained bodyguard in an instant. It seemed that he was skilled in combat. However, when she saw Gong Jie's handsome face, which was extremely similar to Yun Shirshir's, she was stunned. "Shirshir he is?" she asked hesitantly and tentatively. Gong Jie looked up and glanced at her coldly. His eyes were apathetic and cold. "Who are you?" As soon as he spoke, a few guards in black suits immediately surrounded him. Even through the pair of sunglasses, it was difficult to hide their sharp and cold eyes, staring at him like a tiger watching its prey. Mushi's shoulders shrank in fright as she retreated slightly. She was a little intimidated by this terrifying scene. She immediately looked at Yun Shirshir for help. She is my assistant. Her name is Mushi." Yun Shirshir immediately explained. Gong Jie's expression toward Mushi softened a little at her words, but it was still as cold as ice. "Please give us some time. I have something to discuss with her." "Is it convenient?" he asked in a deep voice. "Oh, of course, it's convenient." Mushi was at a loss under his cold gaze. She broke out in a cold sweat as she said, "Sir, please go ahead." Gong Jie nodded and then turned to look at her. "Sis, come with me." He gently held Yun Shirshir's hand and left under the escort of his bodyguards. Mushi stared dumbfoundedly at their departing backs before she came to her senses. Did this man just call Yun Shirshir sister? It was only at this thought that she realized that the two of them really looked alike. Sure. Why hadn't he heard of it before? Now that it had appeared out of nowhere, he was really shocked. Although this man looks cold, he is really handsome. Gong Jie exuded a cold and aloof beauty. Wearing a white suit and a windbreaker, he was handsome and arrogant like a god. Just now, when his cold gaze swept over her, she was so nervous that her heart actually skipped a beat. The siblings' genes were just too perfect. The sister was beautiful, and the brother was as handsome as a cast. She even felt that if this Gong Jie were to enter the entertainment industry, he would definitely set off a storm. Chapter 1338. In the afternoon, the bright sun shone into the house. Yu Yu was woken up by a call from Li Hanlin. He opened his sleepy eyes and picked up the phone. Li Hanlin began to report the company's financial report for the new quarter. Xiao Yichen was still asleep, so Yu Yu got out of bed quietly and walked to the living room. He poured himself a glass of milk and drank it. He looked around and realized that Yun Shirshir was no longer there. He walked to the table and saw the note Yun Shirshir left behind. He glanced at it and realized that she had gone to the shopping mall to buy some things. Yu Yu sat at the table and listened to Li Hanlin's financial report while looking out of the window. However, on Li Hanlin's end, his voice suddenly paused and he said in a deep voice, "Oh right, Director Yin, there's one more thing I need to report to you." His tone was serious and cautious. Yu Yu could not help but become serious when he heard it. "Speak. I've already gotten the results of the report you asked me to verify," Li Hanlin said in a serious tone. "The conclusion is that young Master Gong and your mother are related. This means that he might be your uncle." As soon as he finished speaking, Yu Yu was obviously shocked. He spat out a mouthful of milk on the table. "What did you say?" Yu Yu was shocked and doubtful. "Agent Li, are you sure there's no mistake in your report?" I'm sure there's no mistake. I've checked it repeatedly and this is the result. Lee Hanlon's tone was solemn and cautious. Obviously, he had come to this conclusion after repeated comparisons. Yu Yu's face darkened. Based on their relationship, could it be that his mother was Gong Jie's sister who had been separated from him for 15 years? Based on their seniority, Gong Jie was his uncle? Should he call Gong Jie uncle? As for Gong Jie's father, Gong Xiaoying, the current leader of Hurricane Group and the ruler of half of the fire industry, was actually his grandfather in terms of seniority. Mommy is Gong Xiaoying's daughter, the daughter of the Hurricane Group? Yu Yu's mind was thrown into disarray in the wind. How could there be such a melodramatic thing in this world? Yu Yu bit her pink lips with a conflicted expression. If that was the case, then Mommy and Gong Jie were siblings. She had heard Gong Jie mention that he had been looking for a long-lost relative. Then, the person he had been looking for a long time should be Mommy. However, he was a little conflicted. Was he really going to let Mommy and young Master Gong acknowledge each other? He didn't want his Mommy to interact with the Gong family. There was no need to elaborate on the prominent status of the Hurricane Group. On the other hand, the Gong family, who controlled the Hurricane Group, was undoubtedly a powerful and influential family. The background of the Gong family was not something that the Mu family could compare to. No matter how small a figure in the Gong family was, they could completely stand on their own and do whatever they wanted. If an analogy had to be made, it could be said that Chapter 1339. The Gongs, on the other hand, were closely related to the world structure. In this world, every war that started was closely related to them. In other words, the Gong family's power was obvious. The entire family system could not be explained in a few words. Moreover, the Gongs and Muse had a feud. Yu Yu still remembered how Gong Jie hated the Muse to the core. This would not do. He did not want the Gong family to acknowledge his mother. The thought of having to address Gong Jie as uncle made him feel extremely awkward. Then he thought of how Gong Jie and Mu Yaja would stand face to face. As enemies, their eyes would turn bloodshot. According to seniority, one should address the other as brother-in-law, and the other as brother-in-law. Then he thought of how Gong Jie would grit his teeth when he saw Mu Yaja. That scene was quite scary no matter how he thought about it. Back then, the Muse were the ones who caused his grandmother's death. Although Mu Sheng was not the direct culprit, he was still the one who indirectly caused Mu Qingqing's death. Gong Jie must hate him to the core. He must hate Mu Yaja too. This feud between the Gongs and Muse would not be written off easily no matter what. However, this was not the main point. The main point was that Yu Yu did not want his mother to know his identity. If she knew that he was involved in smuggling, arms and oil at such a young age, he wondered what kind of shocked expression Mommy would have on her face when the time came. Yu Yu had a headache and held his forehead. His temples were throbbing with a dull throbbing pain. Director Yun, what should we do about this matter? Should we report it to Master Gong? Keep it a secret for now, Yu Yu said in a low voice. Let me think about how to handle this matter. Just as he said that, the door lock turned. Yu Yu turned around and saw that Mu Yaja was back. He immediately lowered his voice and instructed, I have something on. I'll hang up first. I'll contact you later. All right. After saying that, he hung up the phone and went up to greet him. His face was no longer gloomy as he raised a cute pink smile. Daddy, you're back. Mu Yaja stood at the door exhausted. He lowered his head slightly and saw Yu Yu walking up to him obediently. She took the jacket from him and hung it on the hanger. He felt a sense of warmth in his heart. Yu Yu, Daddy will hug you. He reached out and pulled Yu Yu into his arms. The little boy was very light and much thinner than Xiaoyi Chen. Mu Yaja kissed his rosy cheeks and asked gently, Where are Mommy and Big Brother? Big Brother is taking an afternoon nap. As for Mommy, she went shopping. She should be back soon, right? Yes. Daddy, are you thirsty? I'll pour you some tea. It's okay. Mu Yaja walked to the sofa and sat down with him in his arms. He held Yu Yu's little hand and squeezed his palm gently. His thin lips curved slightly. It's rare to see you so obedient in front of me. In the past, Yu Yu would only show such an obedient and cute side to Yin Shirshir. Initially, he was cold and distant to him. Later on, he slowly accepted him. Now he was open to him and was no longer so resistant. This little boy had accepted him. Yu Yu's little face blushed, but he snorted coldly and said arrogantly, "Don't be so smug. If it weren't for the fact that you're the man my mommy has chosen, I wouldn't be so gentle to you." Muyaja smiled dotingly and couldn't be bothered to expose him. Chapter 1340. He had experienced the little guy's awkward personality before. Muyaja's handsome eyes curved slightly. He gazed at the little guy's delicate face and kissed him. "Whatever you say." Xiao Yichen woke up and got out of bed. He rubbed his sleepy eyes and walked to the door. When he saw that Muyaja had returned, he immediately went forward and threw himself into his arms. "Daddy, you're back." 2 pink glutinous rice balls, one on the left and one on the right, occupied his arms, like 2 lazy kittens, lying in his arms, incomparably intimate. With the 2 little guys in his arms, Muyaja's gloominess was instantly swept away. Yu Yu's phone suddenly rang. He glanced at it and saw that it was an international number. It was Hurricane Group's internal number. He recognized the code at a glance. It was Gong Jie's number. He immediately took the phone and walked to the side to answer the call. "Young Master Gong? What's the matter?" "Yu Yu, I have good news to announce." On the other end of the line, Gong Jie's usually cold and aloof voice was now tinged with joy and cheerfulness. Yu Yu's heart skipped a beat. He instinctively sensed that something was wrong. However, he still suppressed it and carefully probed. "What's the good news? Tell me." "I found her," Gong Jie announced excitedly. He paused and added, "I found the person I've been looking for." Yu Yu's heart skipped a beat. He was nervous and his tone became sharp. "Who?" "My sister, my biological sister." At the mention of Yun Shirshir, Gong Jie's tone suddenly became warm and gentle. He was even extremely affectionate. "Her name is Yin Shirshir." "Hua." Yu Yu's mind went blank. He felt a sharp pain in his heart and muttered, "Yin Shirshir? You found her?" "Yes." Gong Jie briefly explained to him how he met Yin Shirshir in the mall. The more Yu Yu listened, the more frightened he became. When he found out that Gong Jie and Yin Shirshir were together, his heart skipped a beat. He was afraid that Gong Jie would accidentally reveal his identity to Yin Shirshir. "Young Master Gong, where are you? I'll go find you." "I'm not free right now," Gong Jie continued. "Yu Yu, I'm with her now. I plan to bring her back to the Gong family." Yu Yu was stunned again. Oh my god. This was too crazy. He hung up the phone abruptly and stood by the flower bed. After thinking about it, he felt more and more uneasy. Gong Jie said that he wanted to bring mommy back to the Gong family? No, he had to stop this as much as possible. He couldn't let mommy return to the Gong family. Suddenly, he dialed Li Hanlin's number. "Agent Li, I have something urgent to attend to. Come and pick me up." Li Hanlin sensed his anxious tone and didn't say much. He immediately said that he would arrive in 10 minutes and hung up the phone. Yu Yu returned to his room and changed his clothes. He walked to the living room and told Muyaja that he had something to attend to. Muyaja saw that he was in a hurry and frowned. "Where are you going?" Yu Yu pondered for a moment and explained, "Daddy, I have something very important to attend to." With that, Yu Yu didn't have time to care about Muyaja and left without looking back. Chapter 1341. Gong Jie hung up the phone, bought a cup of milk tea, and got into the car. Sure, do you want a cup of milk tea?" Gong Jie passed the milk tea to her with a gentle smile. His eyes were as beautiful and charming as the stars in the night sky. Yin Shirshir took the cup of milk tea from him, and even forgot to thank him. Her face was still filled with shock. Everything that had happened in front of her was like a dream. She could not help but wonder if she was in a dream or reality. She was still a little confused, and her thoughts were in a mess. She had never thought that the person she had been thinking about for more than 10 years would actually be like a god, descending from the sky in front of her. Therefore, when Gong Jie sat in the car, she stared at his face unblinkingly. She was in a daze and could not blink for a long time. She was a little afraid. She was afraid that if she blinked, the living person sitting in front of her would disappear into thin air. It was too unbelievable. The scenes from more than 10 years ago still appeared clearly in front of her eyes. The memories that had been sealed away suddenly broke through the cage and flashed before her eyes. Mu Jie was her twin brother. She was the elder sister and he was the younger brother. From the time she could remember, other than Mu Qingqing's gentle smile, there was more of Mu Jie's mischievous and adorable face. Mu Jie was born more than 10 minutes after her. They were born one after the other. Moreover, Mu Jie grew up well, and was taller than her by a few centimeters. Therefore, he was rarely willing to call her sister. Most of the time, the little guy would follow behind her and call her Shir. Shir, play with me. Shir, I can't sleep. Can you tell me a story? Shir, why are you crying again? Did someone bully you again? Tell me, who bullied you? I'll teach him a lesson for you. She corrected him over and over again. Whether it was threats or coaxing, the little fellow was not convinced. He even questioned. You were only born a few minutes earlier than me. Why should I call you sister? Even now, Yin Shir could not help but want to laugh every time she recalled the young Mu Jie's awkward little face. But now her younger brother had grown up. He had grown from a little bean who had followed her around to learn how to walk. Now he was 1.9 meters tall, handsome, and had a domineering aura. His originally fair and tender facial features had become even more profound, exquisite, and handsome. That cute and tender little face in her memory had now become a young man. Handsome brows and eyes, a well-defined outline, a high nose and thin lips, and a sharp sense of asceticism. His hair was dyed silver, and it fluttered in the wind, making his chin look as thin as a knife. Yin Shir felt a little regretful. She felt that it was a pity that she could not be by his side and grow up with him. She had missed so many memories with him. Although she was vexed, she also felt that the heavens had been kind to her. At least, they would meet again in this lifetime. Seeing that she kept staring at him, Gong Jie smiled slightly and let go of his high and mighty posture. Just like when they were young, he sat obediently beside her and lowered his head to look at her. He was so much taller than her. Therefore, even though she was sitting, she had to raise her head to look at him. Gong Jie considerately bent down slightly and lowered his body, forcing himself to look at her shoulder level. Chapter 1342. She wanted to take a good look at him. Then he would let her take a good look at him. Yin Shir's heart warmed up. Gong Jie, who had grown up, was even gentler than when he was young. In his eyes, there was a doting smile that almost overflowed. His gentle gaze filled her entire heart. It was warm and cozy. Yin Shir said desolately, Xiao Jie, I'm sorry that I lost you for so long. It's my fault. When Gong Jie saw the desolate expression on her face, he felt as though his heart had been pierced and he felt extremely sorry for her. Sister, don't be sad. It's my fault. Yin Shir pursed her lips and gently cupped his face. She looked at his face carefully and her gaze swept across every inch of his face. Suddenly she smiled. Xiao Jie, you've grown up. You're even more handsome than when you were young. Gong Jie smiled and grabbed her finger. He pressed it against his heart and said in a slightly annoyed tone, Sister, I've been very handsome since I was young. That's a well-known fact. Yin Shir was amused by him. She could not help but use her index finger to gently tap the tip of his nose. You're still as shameless as when you were young. You haven't changed at all. This small action was something that Yin Shir had done to him since they were young. Every time he was mischievous or did something wrong, he would hide behind her and need her to clean up the situation. She could not bear to blame him, so she would gently tap the tip of his nose and pretended to be angry. This was a little tacit understanding between the two of them. Gong Jie was a little greedy for the gentleness of her fingertips. He could not help but miss the innocent times when he was young. He said softly, Sister, tap me again. Yin Shir tapped him again with her fingertips. Gong Jie could not help but hold her hand and gently kiss the back of her hand. Then he greedily pressed his face against it. The back of her hand was a little cold. She had been like this since she was young. Her physique was not good. Throughout the year, there was almost no warmth on her hand, especially on the back of her hand, which was always cold. During winter, she liked to stuff her hand into his embrace to warm it up. Every time this happened, Gong Jie's mouth would always twitch from her cold little hands. However, he couldn't bear to chase her little hand away. Thus, Gong Jie resisted the cold and silently warmed her hands. He didn't seem to care about it, as if he wasn't afraid of the cold, but in fact he was freezing. Sister, I'll take you back, okay? Gong Jia leaned against the back of her hand and said softly. Yin Shirshir was stunned. Go back. Back to where? Back to our home. Gong Jia looked up, his handsome face filled with joy. If father knows that I've found you, he'll be very happy. He always thought that you were no longer in this world. Your appearance is a huge surprise to him. Father. Yin Shirshir was even more confused. What father? Our father. Yin Shirshir's face froze, and her eyes dimmed a little. Xiaojia, we only have a mother. We don't have a father. Have you forgotten? Ever since she could remember, she had never seen her father. She only had her mother and her younger brother. As for who her biological father was, that man had never appeared from the beginning to the end. She had not even seen his shadow. From her mother, she knew that her biological father was a very handsome man. However, in her heart, this man had heartlessly abandoned them. At least, that was what she thought. Chapter 1343. Gong Jia seemed to have seen through her thoughts and said, Sis, you've misunderstood. Father didn't abandon us. Don't mention that man. Yin Shirshir gloomily said, he's not fit to be a father. I haven't even seen his shadow since I was young. Why should I acknowledge him? After a pause, she asked suspiciously, Xiaojia, where have you been for the past 10 years? Gong Jia was silent for a moment before he looked up and told her what happened 20 years ago. Back then, when Hurricane Group was first established, it was just a shipping conglomerate. Gong Xiaoying, who was now an all-powerful military conglomerate, used to be the scion of a shipping family. His father was a famous shipping magnate, Gong Li. At that time, the Mu family's business was at its most glorious. At a banquet, Mu Qingqing and Gong Xiaoying met by chance. At that time, Mu Qingqing was wearing a luxurious dress. She walked in leisurely, attracting Gong Xiaoying's attention. At that time, Gong Xiaoying was in his 20s. He was suave and extraordinarily handsome. Although he had seen many beauties, he was still deeply stunned by Mu Qingqing's splendid attire. He invited her to dance with him. Mu Qingqing gladly agreed. Sparks flew between the two at the ball. They fell in love, got to know each other, and promised each other. Mu Xing soon learned of this and immediately asked her to cut off her relationship with Gong Xiaoying as soon as possible. In his eyes, the Gong family at that time could not be compared to the Mu family at all. Moreover, he was selfish toward her. He only hoped that she could stay by his side. How could he tolerate her being tainted by other men? Mu Qingqing was at the age of puberty. How could her love for Gong Xiaoying be cut off so easily? Although she agreed on the surface, she still secretly met with Gong Xiaoying behind Mu Sheng's back. Gong Xiaoying also wanted her. However, at that time, his father ordered him to go abroad to take over the maritime affairs of the Eurasian region. Gong Xiaoying then asked Mu Qingqing to go abroad with him and leave the Mu family. They also agreed to leave the capital together. After much consideration, Mu Qingqing could not bring herself to harden her heart. Thus, she decided to confess this matter to Mu Sheng, hoping that he would grant her wish. Unexpectedly, when Mu Sheng learned of this matter, not only did he not agree to it, he even flew into a rage and ordered his men to put her under house arrest. At the appointed time, Mu Qingqing did not show up. Gong Xiaoying left alone in dejection. Mu Qingqing missed the appointment and fell ill from lovesickness. In the end, she fell ill in bed. Later, she was found to be pregnant. When Mu Sheng heard about this, he did not even need to think about who the father of the child in her stomach was. At the thought that she was pregnant out of wedlock, he became even more furious and ordered her to abort the child. Mu Qingqing refused. In order to protect her child, she locked herself in her room and refused to come out. Later, with the help of the Mu family's servants, Mu Qingqing escaped from the Mu family and secretly gave birth to 2 children. They were a pair of boy-girl twins. Mu Qingqing then changed her name and took care of the 2 children. While avoiding the Mu family's pursuit, she secretly raised the 2 children. It was only after a car accident later that she was buried in a sea of fire. After that accident, Yin Shirshir and Gong Jia survived. Chapter 1344. After Mu Qingqing left the Mu family, she got in touch with Gong Xiaoying. At first, Gong Xiaoying thought that the reason why Mu Qingqing didn't show up was because she didn't have any feelings for him. However, when he found out from her that she was under house arrest, including the fact that she was under house arrest by Mu Sheng, Gong Xiaoying flew into a rage and declared that he would seek revenge on the Mu family. At that time, the Gong group had gone through a few years of consolidation. Gong Li handed over the family's affairs to him, and under his management, its power grew continuously. It was now an existence that could stand shoulder to shoulder with the Mu family. In front of the Mu family, the Gong family had the confidence to be arrogant. However, Mu Qingqing cared about their relationship and asked Gong Xiaoying not to hurt the Mu family's foundation, even if he wanted to take action. Gong Xiaoying, however, did not listen to her. In a fit of anger, he mobilized all his forces to deal a heavy blow to the Mu group. At that time, Mu Sheng's mind was not on the Mu group at all. He was focused on finding Mu Qingqing and had no time to care about the Mu group. Hence, under the Gong family's attack, the Mu group suffered a heavy blow. From then on, the Mu group's morale was low and could not recover from the setback. Gradually, rumors spread in the capital that the legendary Mu group was about to collapse. It was only later when Mu Yaja took office and turned the tide, bringing the Mu group back on track. Of course, this was all in the future. Gong Xiaoying was overjoyed when he learned from Mu Qingqing that she had given birth to a pair of children for him. He was overjoyed when he learned that they had a pair of children. He promised her that, after this storm, he would bring her and the children back to the Gong family and live happily together. Mu Qingqing's heart was filled with longing. Being able to live happily with the man she loved was the most beautiful dream in her heart. For this, she had been waiting for him silently without any complaints or regrets. However, at that time, Gong Xiaoying had already single-handedly established the Hurricane Group. For a long time, Gong Xiaoying was busy dealing with the Eurasian shipping matters. Hence, he could not be in two places at once and could only entrust Mu Qingqing and the children to a trusted aide in the country. That aide had some authority too. With him covering for them, Mu Sheng could not find Mu Qingqing's hiding place for a while. On the day of the car accident, Mu Qingqing and Gong Xiaoying had agreed to meet at the port for him to bring her away. On that day, Gong Xiaoying had waited for her for so long, but she still didn't show up. In the end, he missed her again. Regretfully, this missed opportunity for a lifetime. The only thing he received was a piece of unfortunate news, and a handsome boy brought back by his men from the hospital. That boy had temporarily lost a part of his memory in that car accident, due to external injuries. He forgot his own name, forgot who his mother was, forgot who his relatives were. Mu had even forgotten who he was. When he opened his eyes, his mind was in a state of chaos. He was in a daze. Gong Xiaoying's men arrived and brought him back to the Gong family. When the man learned of Mu Qingqing's death, he was stunned for a long time. Other than grief, he felt even more lost and powerless. At that time, he already had a lot. However, the woman he wanted the most was always missed by a series of coincidences. He missed her again and again. Chapter 1345. He sank into deep regret and pain, unable to extricate himself from it. For a long time, he was unable to recover from his shock. When his men brought Gong Jie to him, Gong Xiaoying squatted down in front of the child and carefully examined him. The child's facial features were well defined. Although he was still young and childish, he could vaguely see his own reflection on his face. His eyes, in particular, were similar to Mu Qingqing's. According to his men, only one of the two children survived. His daughter, too, had unfortunately lost her life in the accident. His son, on the other hand, was the only survivor of the accident. Gong Xiaoying was so heartbroken that he was on the verge of paralysis. He spared no effort to investigate this matter. He initially thought that the accident was a natural disaster, but when the truth was revealed, he did not expect it to be a man-made disaster. It was said that Mu Qingqing was chased by the men sent by the Mu family on her way to the harbor. After more than an hour of desperate struggle, the car could not brake in time and careened off the cliff, crashing down. According to the investigation report, the brake malfunction was due to someone tampering with it. When Gong Xiaoying received this report, his hands trembled uncontrollably. He hated it. He hated it. He hated the cruel executioner of the Mu family to the bone. At the same time, he was filled with regret. Mu Sheng, that devil. If he had known this would happen, he would not have listened to Mu Qingqing's advice not to hurt the Mu family's foundation. Alas, What did her gentleness, kindness, and understanding get in return? In return, it was that devil's selfish possessiveness and overbearing lust. If it were not for that tyrant, his woman would not have been separated from him forever. Gong Xiaoying's hatred and disgust toward the Mu family were unreservedly instilled in Gong Jie's mind. Therefore, Gong Jie hated the Mu family to the core. It was also because of this that when Gong Jie mentioned the Mu family, the hatred that had been deeply imprinted in his heart since he was young would unscrupulously erupt. It was as if the hatred for the Mu family had already evolved into his nature. He only knew that if it weren't for the Mu family, his mother and sister wouldn't have died in the car accident. If it wasn't for the Mu family, perhaps her father and mother would have lived happily together for the rest of their lives. They wouldn't be separated forever like this. Therefore, the seed of revenge had been planted in his bones since he was very young. As time passed, it grew stronger and stronger. His hatred for the Mu family had already seeped into his bones and blood. It was inseparable. It was rumored that the head of the Gong family, Gong Xiaoying, had 4 children. It was said that Gong Xiaoying's first child had died at an early age due to a mishap. If not for that mishap, the child would have been 24 years old by now. Gong Jie, on the other hand, was ranked second, so everyone respectfully addressed him as second master. Although he was the second young master, Gong Jie's position in the Gong family was undoubtedly the oldest. As the eldest son and a core member of the Hurricane Group, Gong Jie's performance did not disappoint and was outstanding. When he debuted and took over the company's affairs, he was only 12 years old. In order to let him gain experience, Gong Xiaoying put the North American market under his name. Chapter 1346. In just 3 short years, Gong Jie had become an independent figure. Now, at the age of 24, he had become the leader of the Hurricane Group and the chief commander of the North American market. At the same time, he was also a core member of the Hurricane Group's Eye in the Sky plan. He held a prominent position. If there were any role in the Hurricane Group that you admired, it would be the crown prince of the Gong family, the person in charge of the North American market, Gong Jie. Sis, come back to the Gong family with me. If father knows that you're still alive, he'll be very happy. Yin Shishir was stunned. The Gong family? What kind of place is that? It's your home. No. Yin Shishir's smile faded a little. My home is here. Gong Jie was stunned. He felt as if his heart had been stabbed. Xiao Jie, I really don't have any concept of our home or our father that you're talking about. I grew up in this city and settled down here. This is my home. Yin Shishir said calmly. As for the so-called Gong family and their so-called father that Gong Jie had mentioned, her heart did not waver at all. She had no intention of acknowledging him either. She still felt a little hatred and alienation toward Gong Xiaoying. Back then, if he hadn't been so meticulous and focused on his career, if he had been able to fulfill his responsibility as a man and protect his mother, her mother would not have died at such a young age. Mu Qingqing's death was indeed related to the Mu family. However, as a man who had been entrusted to his mother, how could he not protect her? Could it be that he did not have the ability to do so? Not necessarily. Those were just excuses. At the end of the day, it was because in his heart, his mother's position was not as important as his career. Therefore, Yin Shishir also felt a little resentment toward Gong Xiaoying. Moreover, so many years had passed. She really did not have any feelings for this nominal father of hers. If she really returned to the Gong family with Gong Jie, what would happen to you? What would happen to Xiao Yichen? Would the Gong family acknowledge these 2 children? Gong Xiaoying hated the Mu family so much that he hated them to the bone. How could she hope that Gong Xiaoying would acknowledge the 2 children? Yu and Xiao Yichen had the blood of the Mu family. What about the blood of the tyrant that Gong Xiaoying hated to the core? Would he acknowledge them? Even if he was willing to acknowledge Yu and... What about Mu Yaja? He would definitely not acknowledge him. She didn't want to follow in her mother's footsteps and repeat her mistakes. Gong Xiaoying, Yichen's sister. Gong Jie's heart throbbed painfully. It wasn't easy for me to find you. I don't want to lose you again. Can't we go home together? Yin Shishir was silent for a moment. Then she said slowly, Xiao Jie, I'm really happy to know that you're still alive. However, I really can't do it if you want me to go back to the Gong family with you. She paused for a moment. Her eyelashes trembled slightly. Then, a trace of loneliness appeared on her face. I really can't forgive that man. Why? Gong Jie persistently asked. Chapter 1347. Yin Shishir flared up all of a sudden. You don't remember, but I do. Mommy has been waiting for him for so many years. 10 years. In the end, what did I get in return? Shishir. Gong Jie was taken aback and a little stunned. Yin Shishir sneered again. He didn't take responsibility at all. How am I supposed to acknowledge him as father now? Okay. Sis, calm down. I won't force you to return to the Gong family. I won't force you. Gong Jie hurriedly comforted her. He, who was usually cold and aloof, showed a rare loss of control and panic on his face. He repeatedly consoled her. I won't force you to acknowledge your father. I won't. So sis, don't be so agitated, okay? Okay. Anyway, I won't return to the Gong family. Yin Shishir reiterated her stand. Gong Jie was a little frustrated, but there was nothing he could do about it. Sis, let's have dinner together today. No. I have to go home. Yin Shishir thought of Yu and Xiaoyi Chen. They should still be waiting for her at home. It was time for her to go home. Gong Jie was reluctant, but he could not bear to force Yin Shishir, so he did not ask her to stay for dinner. He gently asked, Where is your home? I'll send you back. Yin Shishir gave him an address, and Gong Jie instructed the chauffeur to send her home. On the way, Yin Tianyu called. The moment the call went through, Yu Yu's anxious voice could be heard from the other end. Mommy, where are you now? I'm on my way home. Yu Yu was startled and still had lingering fears. He thought that his mommy was about to be kidnapped back to the Gong family by Gong Jie, so he was rushing over to rescue her. Yu Yu sighed helplessly and ordered Li Hanlin to turn around and prepare to return home. Since mommy was going home, he was relieved. Moreover, from Yin Shishir's tone he could not detect anything strange. It seemed that the Gong Jie had not revealed his identity for the time being. Mommy probably did not know about it yet. Yu Yu heaved a sigh of relief. Mommy, when are you coming home? He asked again obediently. About 10 minutes left. Yu Yu's tone immediately lightened up. All right, then I'll wait at home for mother's return. Yin Shishir hung up the phone. Gong Jie immediately asked with concern, Who called? Yin Shishir did not hide anything from Gong Jie. She smiled and said, My son. Gong Jie was stunned and couldn't come back to his senses for a long time. You have a son? Yes. In that case, Xiao Jie, you're an uncle now. Gong Jie still could not come back to his senses for a long time. You're still so young. Why did you? Gong Jie was confused. He finally digested this fact. His thin lips twitched slightly and formed a complicated arc. I didn't expect that I already have a nephew. Yin Shishir's lips curled into a smile. Her mood brightened at the thought of the two lads. How old are you? He just had his birthday not long ago. He's 7 years old. 7 years old? Gong Jie was shocked again and his gaze froze. You gave birth at the age of 18? Because of this, Gong Jie's expression could not help but turn ugly. Chapter 1348. There was no doubt that she had given birth to a child before getting married. However, what Gong Jie was more concerned about was why she had given birth to a child before getting married. How could this be? A bad feeling arose in Gong Jie's heart. What exactly did a girl go through at the age of 18 to have a child before getting married? She was only 24. The child was already 7 years old. This was not the normal life trajectory of a woman, was it? This matter is a little complicated. I'll explain it to you slowly another time, okay? Yin Shishir did not know how to bring it up to him. In fact, no matter how many years had passed, Yin Shishir was still a little embarrassed to talk about this past. When she was 18 years old, she gave herself to someone to save the Yin family from bankruptcy. She took the unconventional path and signed a surrogacy contract with the Mu family. This was undoubtedly an act of selling her body. However, she did not regret it. In fact, she was even glad that it was because of this incident that she gave birth to Yu. This child was probably the happiest gift that the heavens had given her in her long life. Yu was the best gift that God had given her. She had always felt that this gift was extremely precious. However, she still felt that surrogacy was indeed a difficult thing to talk about. At least, in front of Gong Jie. She was still not mentally prepared to let him know about this matter. Therefore, she decided to keep it a secret for the time being. Gong Jie's expression froze, but he smiled and said, "Tomorrow, okay?" Tomorrow let's set a time and place. Sis, we've been apart for so long. I really want to know how you've been for the past 10 years. Gong Jie looked at her expectantly. He had not been able to participate in her life for a full 15 years. He hoped that he could make up for this regret as soon as possible. Yin Shishir nodded. The car stopped at the entrance of Xiangti Walk. Yin Shishir got out of the car and closed the door. She waved at him and said, "I'm home. You should go home early too." "Okay. Xiaojie, where are you staying now?" Yin Shishir suddenly asked. Gong Jie smiled and said, "The Gong family has businesses all over the world. This time, I'm here to meet someone. Because my business has come to an end, I'll be staying in the country for a while." "Okay then, see you tomorrow." Yin Shishir smiled and waved at him. She looked back 3 times with each step and entered the door. Gong Jie stared at her back in a daze until her figure disappeared into the horizon. Then he reluctantly withdrew his gaze. However, when he turned his head, he caught a glimpse of a black wallet that had fallen on the seat. It seemed that she had left it on the seat in a hurry. Out of curiosity, he picked up the wallet. It was a wallet-style wallet. He flipped it open, and a photo came into view. Gong Jie couldn't help but notice the photo. His gaze was fixed on it. However, when he saw that it was a photo of Yin Shishir and a little munchkin, he was stunned. In the photo, Yin Shishir was standing at the school gate with a delicate-looking little kid in her arms. The little munchkin looked to be no more than 5 years old, but his eyes were delicate and adorable. His cheeks were rosy and tender as he nestled in Yin Shishir's arms with a sweet smile. Gong Jie recognized the child in the photo at once. Yin Tianyu. How could it be him? Gong Jie was once again thrown into disarray. What exactly was going on? Chapter 1349. Gong Jie suddenly recalled Yin Shishir's words. She said that she had a 7-year-old child. Be it in terms of looks or details, there was no doubt that Yin Tianyu and Yin Shishir were mother and son. In other words, the legendary genius who developed the Deva Eye project and proposed the super aerial control theory, who could break through the Pentagon's defense system with his eyes closed, was actually his nephew. Did you know about this? That day, when he pointed to the poster in Yu Yu's office and questioned him, this child clearly knew about Yin Shishir's identity, yet he still pretended to be a fool and acted cute in front of him. He, on the other hand, was kept in the dark by this child for so long. Furious, Gong Jie picked up his phone and dialed his nephew's number. Just as Yin Tianyu picked up the call, Gong Jie's cold and gloomy voice sounded from the other end. "Yin Tianyu, don't you owe me an explanation?" Yu Yu, on the other hand, was baffled by such an abrupt question. It came out of nowhere, so he could not react in time. He asked in a daze, "Second Master Gong, what do you mean by this?" When Gong Jie heard this, he thought that Yu Yu was still deliberately hiding things from him. Seeing that the child was still pretending to be a fool, Gong Jie almost lost his temper over the phone. However, at the thought that this child was, after all, his little nephew, he held himself back. Suppressing the anger in his heart, he calmly asked, "My little nephew, how much longer do you want to hide this from your uncle?" His tone was faint with a hint of displeasure. The moment Yin Tianyu heard this, he knew that the man had already figured out his identity and his relationship with Yin Shishir. Thus, he decided not to hide it any longer and smiled. "Master Gong, you already know?" Gong Jie snorted. Yu Yu, let me remind you, according to seniority, you should call me uncle." Yin Tianyu burst into laughter. "Second Master Gong, you're so adorable. Did you only realize it now? When I first saw you at the airport, I had my suspicions. It's just that I had too many things on hand at that time, so I didn't have time to prove it." Yu Yu paused and suddenly frowned in disdain. "You're so slow and stupid. I'm starting to wonder if you're my biological uncle." Gong Jie's face darkened at once. He gritted his teeth and said, "How dare you tease me?" "I wouldn't dare. How would I dare to tease my uncle?" Although Yu said that, she was just teasing him. Gong Jie was getting angrier and angrier. Yin Tianyu was obviously teasing him. He, on the other hand, had been in the industry for so many years, and had always acted swiftly and decisively. Now he was actually being teased by a 7-year-old child. Gong Jie felt indignant. Yu, how dare you make fun of me? You're dead meat. Don't. You've wronged me. Yu's pink lips pursed slightly as a look of grievance appeared on her tender face. I only had my suspicions before, and I only found out today that you're my uncle. I didn't mean to tease you. How did you find out? Gong Jie narrowed his eyes. He was very suspicious of how this lad came to this conclusion. Yu smiled and decided to come clean. Yesterday, I secretly plucked a strand of hair from your head. Gong Jie's face darkened when he heard that. Chapter 1350. Gong Jie, on the other hand, was secretly surprised because he did not feel anything at all. When did you do it? The boy replied slowly. When you stood up, I took advantage of the situation to pull it out. The corners of Gong Jie's eyes twitched fiercely. This kid was really clever. He had actually secretly pulled out a strand of hair from his head to do a DNA test. Only he could think of such a thing. Gong Jie snorted coldly. His displeased tone showed that he was slightly dissatisfied. Yu licked his pink lips and smiled. Young Master Gong, don't be angry. I was just trying to protect Mommy. What if the person you were looking for was not Mommy? Wouldn't it be a mistake then? I'm more cautious when doing things. If it wasn't foolproof, I wouldn't have done it. Then you've got your answer now. Gong Jie snorted, but a look of admiration flashed across his handsome face. Although he still felt that it was quite unpleasant to be teased by a 7-year-old child. However, when he thought about how Yu had done it to protect Yin Shishir, he was full of admiration. After all, if it were him, he would also be so cautious and confirm before making a decision. Yu muttered. Now I know. You're Mommy's younger brother. No wonder, from the first time I saw you, I felt that you and Mommy looked a lot alike. At that time, I started to have my suspicions. When he said this, Yin Shishir's gentle smile suddenly appeared in Gong Jie's eyes. His eyes were as gentle as water in an instant. Yes. Your Mommy and I have looked very alike since we were young. People who saw us were very surprised. They said that we looked like we were made from the same mold. Twins of different sexes were the union of different eggs. Generally speaking, it was very rare for twins of different sexes to look so alike. However, for some reason, Yin Shishir and Gong Jie looked like they were made from the same mold since they were born. When they were young, Mu Qingcheng thought it was fun, so she cut Yin Shishir's hair short and put on a little suit. She also let Gong Jie's hair grow long and put on a little skirt. When they stood together, they did not look out of place at all. Both of them had a pair of eyes that could captivate all living things. Their eyes were like silk. Gong Jie's eyes were very long. Coupled with his deep eyes and thick and long eyelashes, at first glance, it looked like he had put on very deep eyeliner. Yu found it interesting as well. Gong Jie and Yin Shishir stood side by side, and one could tell at a glance that they were siblings. Gong Jie said coldly, "Since you know my identity, shouldn't you change the way you address me?" Yu's eyebrows raised. There's no hurry to change the way I address you. He had a feeling that he was at a disadvantage when he changed from young Master Gong to uncle. He was a little unhappy. Gong Jie smiled evilly and said playfully, "Little nephew, if I'm not wrong, your Mommy doesn't know about your relationship with the Hurricane Group, right?" Yu was stunned. So she doesn't know about your identity? Has she been kept in the dark about what you've done in Hurricane Group in the past 2 years, as well as the waves you've stirred up? Gong Jie's voice deepened as his tone deepened with a hint of meaning. Yu was speechless. He did not even need to think about what Gong Jie was trying to say. Yu was speechless as he looked into the distance. This Gong Jie was more two-faced than he thought. Chapter 1351. Gong Jie did not know what he was thinking though, so he decided to provoke him further. Actually, I'm curious too. What would your Mommy think if she were to find out that you're playing with arms, smuggling, oil, and hacking at such a young age instead of studying properly? She'll definitely teach you a lesson. Uncle. On the other end of the line, Yu said through gritted teeth. Gong Jie was satisfied. Good boy, little nephew. But I'm curious too. Yu Yu's eyes were smiling. Take a guess. If mommy finds out that her precious son is playing with these things at such a young age, and that it was his uncle who taught him, what will she think? Gong Jie's face darkened instantly. Mimicking his earlier threatening tone, Yu Yu casually enunciated each word. Uncle, if mommy finds out that you've brought me into the oil business, smuggling business, and even instigated me to play with firearms, she'll definitely explode in anger. It's scary just thinking about it when mommy gets angry. Gong Jie immediately softened and lost all of his earlier arrogance. Yu Yu, let's talk things over. Don't threaten people so easily. Yu Yu was satisfied. This round was a draw. No one was at a disadvantage. When it came to eloquence, he had never lost to anyone. Gong Jie held the phone and had a lot of questions to ask. He had been separated from Yin Shishir for 15 years. 15 years was not a long time, but it had taken up 3/4 of his life. After being separated for such a long time, he had a lot of things to say and a lot of questions to ask. However, when the words reached his throat, they were stuck. For a moment he could not think of anything to ask. Or perhaps, there were too many things he wanted to ask. For a moment he did not know where to start. He wanted to know if she had been living well for the past 15 years. Had she been wronged in any way? Had she been bullied? 15 years ago, after they were separated, where did she go? Was she adopted? What exactly happened to her when she was 18 that caused her to have a child at such a young age? When Gong Jie thought of this, his heart ached. 18 years old was still so young. In this country, girls of this age should still be studying. He did some calculations. At that time, she should still be in university and hadn't graduated yet. She had a child when she was still in school. What exactly happened? Could it be? Was she bullied by other boys? This was the only hypothesis that Gong Jie could think of. At the age of 18, she was young and ignorant. She was inexperienced and inexperienced. Girls were easily deceived by boys. She foolishly trusted him with her heart, only to be toyed with. Or was it because she was violated? Thinking of this suspicion, Gong Jie's heart suddenly surged with rage. If he were to find out what had happened 7 years ago, if he were to find out who the man who had bullied her was, he would dismember that man into 1,000 pieces and throw him into the sea to feed the fish. In the restaurant, Mu Yaja elegantly sneezed, and then his face was filled with suspicion. Was someone talking bad about him? Yu Yu sensed that Gong Jie's breathing suddenly became heavy. Not knowing what he was thinking, he asked lightly, "Young Master Gong, what are you thinking about?" "What did you call me?" Gong Jie raised his eyebrows unhappily and reminded him. Only then did the boy realize what he had said. He muttered unwillingly, "I'm not used to the sudden change of address. Uncle." Chapter 1352. What a coincidence. Sometimes fate really knows how to play tricks on people. Yu Yu sighed like an old man. Who would have thought that the world with more than 6 billion people would turn out to be one big family in the end? That meant that his grandfather was the head of the Gong family, Gong Xiaoying. Yu Yu's lips twitched. Life was truly a fantasy, truly miraculous. Your mommy gave birth to you when she was only 18? Gong Jie asked the question in his heart. She was pregnant at such a young age. At that time, she should still be in school and hadn't graduated yet, right? Why did she give birth so early? Yu Yu was stunned and did not respond immediately. He only replied vaguely, "Mommy is actually pregnant with twins. I have an older brother." However, he avoided the topic. He could not possibly talk about what happened 7 years ago. 7 years ago, when the Yun family went bankrupt, his mother signed a surrogate pregnancy contract with the Mu family in order to repay the family's debts. If Gong Jie were to find out about this, she was afraid that he would have another bloody grudge in his heart. He would never be able to forgive the Mu family in this lifetime. Is she married? Gong Jie was very concerned about this question. Yu Yu touched the bridge of his nose and said, "Yes, she is. But mommy's status is a little special, so they haven't held a wedding yet." In his mind, mommy and daddy were already married. They just lacked a certificate and a grand wedding. In that case, mommy and daddy were unlicensed. What status? Mommy is a celebrity. She's busy with her career now, so they haven't held a wedding yet. Gong Jia was even more confused as he listened. So she gave birth out of wedlock? Yu Yu's lips twitched. Yes, you can say that. Gong Jia's eyelids twitched. Since she's already pregnant, why isn't she married? It's not good for a woman to have a child out of wedlock. His tone suddenly turned cold. Could it be that bastard wants to play with my sister? The boy was taken aback by his ferocious tone. Uncle, calm down. Calm down, don't get agitated. Gong Jia couldn't calm down. He was very serious when it came to Yin Shirshir. Uncle, don't you worry too much? Calm down. If Daddy can't give Mommy a proper status, even I won't agree to it, let alone you. Yu Yu said with an elegant smile. So who is that man? Gong Jia squeezed out a few words through gritted teeth. Towards Yin Shirshir's man, he didn't know why, but he was obviously very hostile. There was also a sour smell when it was smelled. Yu Yu broke out in a cold sweat. He finally saw it clearly. This Gong Jia turned out to be a siscon. Yu Yu's eyes twitched as he said perfunctorily. I'm preparing for dinner. Uncle, let's talk again when you're free. I'm hanging up. Wait, you haven't answered me. Without waiting for Gong Jia to finish speaking, Yin Tianyu hung up the phone. Yu Yu walked into the living room and coincidentally bumped into Yin Shirshir. Before Yu Yu could go up to her, Xiao Yichen ran to her and threw himself into her arms. Mommy, you're back? He hugged Yin Shirshir tightly in joy. A day apart felt like 3 years. Yu Yu glanced at him. What a clingy little guy. Chapter 1353. Good boy, good boy. I've been waiting for Mommy to come home. Xiao Yichen beamed brightly. Yin Shirshir put down Xiao Yichen and walked over to Muyaja, hugging his shoulders from behind. When did you come home? Muyaja naturally held her arm and replied indifferently, 4 o'clock. The moment he opened his mouth, Yin Shirshir could tell from his cold tone that he was not in a good mood. You seem to be in a bad mood? Muyaja narrowed his eyes. There was a flash of tiredness and anger in his eyes, but he quickly regained his composure and smiled. No. From your tone, you seem to have something on your mind. Yin Shirshir was extremely sensitive, so she could tell at once that he had a lot on his mind. Muyaja comforted her. Don't think too much. I'm fine. He turned around and stared at her. Where did you go? Oh, I went to the mall in the afternoon to buy some daily necessities. Purchase? What do you need to buy? Beds, blankets, and so on. In the end, she was recognized midway. Luckily, Gong Jia came to her rescue. Otherwise, she would be in a sorry state. Muyaja was a little speechless. We have beds and blankets at home. You don't need to buy them, right? I went to buy them because I needed them. Yin Shirshir pondered for a moment before she succinctly repeated to him what Yin Yeqing had told her over the phone in the afternoon. In the end, she smiled and said, Uncle has always taken good care of our family. Now that something like this has happened, I can't take care of much, but I'll try my best to satisfy your needs. Yes. Still, you should be careful when you go out now. It'll be very dangerous if someone recognizes you. As soon as Muyaja finished speaking, Yin Shirshir recalled what had happened in the afternoon. So many people had chased after her. Thinking about it, she still had lingering fears. In the future, if there's anything you need to purchase, just tell me and I'll get someone to prepare it for you. I'm worried about you going out. Yin Shirshir felt warmth in her heart. She smiled and nodded. Okay, I got it. Muyaja held her in his arms and kissed her cheek in front of the 2 children. She nudged his shoulder and muttered in a low voice. Hey, restrain yourself a little. The children are all here. It doesn't matter. It's good to let them practice for a while. Practice for a while. Wasn't this education a little too early? Muyaja asked gently. Tonight, there's no cooking at home. Let's go out to eat. What do you want to eat? I can't think of anything at the moment. Yin Shirshir turned to look at Yu Yu. Yu Yu, what do you want to eat? I'll listen to Mommy. Mommy's boy number 1 answered. Yin Shirshir was silent for a moment before she asked Xiao Yichen. Xiao Yichen, is there anything you like to eat? I'll listen to Mommy too. Mommy's boy number 2 stood obediently. Yin Shirshir's eyes twitched. After thinking hard for a long time, she helplessly turned to look at Muyaja. Do you have any ideas? I'll listen to you. The number one wife slave looked at her gently and answered, "Hey, did he have to be like this? Did he leave such a difficult problem like where to eat tonight for her to solve?" After thinking about it, Yu and Xiaoyichen didn't like pizza. Mu Yaja should be sick of French cuisine. Chapter 1354. That night, Mu Lianjue felt uneasy. His uncle had booked a flight to San Francisco for him the next morning. In order to ensure his safety, he specially arranged for him to stay in a safe place. The reason why it was a safe place was that his uncle had arranged for him to stay in an extremely secluded military base. Not far from where Mu Lianjue was staying was where the army was stationed. The area within a radius of 100 miles was guarded by his uncle's men, so it was relatively safe. However, Mu Lianjue was still feeling uneasy. Not to mention sleeping soundly, he could not even sit up straight in bed. His uncle had given him a very clear hint. They had been brothers for decades. Naturally, he wouldn't just sit by and watch him die. However, there was only so much he could do. After escorting him abroad, he could only find another place to settle down. He couldn't help too much. After all, once he left the country, it would be beyond his uncle's reach. However, there was one thing that his uncle had made very clear. That was Mu Yaja would not let him off easily. He would probably take action tonight. This nephew of his was so stubborn that it gave Mu Linfeng a headache. No matter how he tried to persuade him, it was useless. Mu Yaja had already made up his mind, and was not going to give him any room for negotiation. It was obvious that he wanted to kill his nephew. Everyone had a reverse scale, and they all had their own forbidden areas. Since Mu Lianjue had touched his reverse scale and trespassed on his forbidden zone, he could not be blamed for being merciful to him. Mu Yaja told his uncle, "I don't care how you protect him. Since you want to protect him from me, don't blame me for not caring about our relationship." The moment he said this, his stance was laid out before him. Knowing Mu Yaja's character well, Mu Linfeng knew that he would not let this matter rest. Hence, he told his nephew that as his elder brother, he could only help him this much. The rest was up to him. Sitting on pins and needles, Mu Lianjue only felt that every minute and second was so long. His uncle settled him in a small room at the base. The space inside was very small. It was a camp, so there was only a bed, a table, and a lamp on the table. These were all the furnishings in the room. The night gradually darkened. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door. Startled, Mu Lianjue shot up from the bed. "Who is it?" "Fourth Master, it's late. You should rest." It turned out that it was the sentinel at the base. Seeing that the light in the room was still on, he kindly reminded him. Mu Lianjue, who had lifted the rock up, dropped to the ground and half-heartedly said, "It's none of your business. Go and guard him obediently." "Understood." The sentinel's reply, and then left. The nights, outside the window. It was late at night, and the wind was getting stronger. Despite the tightly shut windows, Mu Lianjue's heart seemed to be flustered by the wind outside. He could not calm himself down. Outside the door too. Impatiently he said, "I'm not sleeping. Don't disturb me." "Fourth Master Mu, please open the door." The voice outside the door was incomparably respectful and polite. Infuriated, he thought that the sentinel had come to poke his nose into other people's business again. He walked over and opened the door, only to see a group of fully armed mercenaries standing at the door with cold and unfriendly faces. Chapter 1355. It was as if something had exploded in his head. After a burst of blinding white light, he was left in a daze. "Fourth Master, come with us." That person's tone was icy cold, giving people a very strange feeling. It was as if he was a prison guard in ancient times who had come to bring a condemned prisoner to the execution ground. Mu Lianjue's lips trembled violently out of fear. "Who are you? Where are you taking me?" "Fourth Master, be good and come with us. We're here on Master's orders to take you back." His heart fell into an ice cellar at that person's words. He was terrified and helpless. He didn't even need to think about it to know who this master was. However, this was Mu Linfeng's territory. The capital's military encampment was 100-mile radius around it. As a stronghold, it was heavily guarded and impenetrable. Normally, this place was used as a secret training base for important military exercises of the country. The level of security was obvious. How did these people barge in? That person ignored him and sized up the terrified look on his face without batting an eyelid. His eyes were as cold as ice, like an emotionless machine. Fourth Master, let's not waste each other's time. If you know what's good for you, you'd better come with us obediently. Don't be so miserable at the last moment. In other words, they would use force on him if he did not stay put and follow them. The warning in his words, coupled with the cold aura on his face, was chilling. What are you trying to do? Mu Lianjue dared not move, much less go with them. He cursed inwardly. Where were the soldiers stationed here? Where did they go? What was Mu Linfeng doing? Didn't they say that this area was heavily guarded? Why did Mu Yaja's men barge in without a sound? He didn't know what would await him if he left with these people. Was it death? According to Mu Linfeng, that brat seemed to want to kill him. Even going as far as to kill him. Did he really not care about their relationship as uncle and nephew? Did he really have to be so cruel as to force him into a dead end? I won't go with you. Mu Lianjue was not stupid. He knew that if he went back with them, what awaited him would be the final judgment. Would he still have a chance of survival then? Fourth Master, I'd like to remind you that you have no right to negotiate with us now. That person's face clearly showed mockery as he looked at him coldly. Whether you're willing or not, you have to come with us. As for whether you want to leave with dignity or not, it's up to you. My master told me to leave you some face, so before we take a tough stance, you have the right to maintain your dignity. This was the last bit of mercy Mu Lianjue's mercy. That was because the same blood flowed in their veins. Mu Lianjue's heart felt stifled as if it were being crushed by a heavy rock, making it hard for him to breathe. He took a few steps back and looked out of the window in a panic, but he heard the man say coldly, "Don't look. The soldiers stationed outside the house have all been taken care of." You guys. Mu Lianjue trembled with rage. What was to come, at this moment, finally come. Chapter 1356. Could it be that he really could not escape this ordeal? I can go back with you. But you have to promise me that you won't take my life. Mu Lianjue shamelessly made such a request. That person snorted coldly. His tone was filled with ridicule and contempt, as if he was mocking his naivety and ignorance. Promise your life. Don't be naive, Fourth Master Mu. You don't have the right to negotiate with us. Either you come with us with dignity, or we'll take you away by force, regardless of life or death. This person spoke without the slightest bit of mercy, not leaving any leeway for him, regardless of life or death. Mu Lianjue turned pale with fright. What did this mean? Did he have to resort to violence if he struggled even a little? He stood stubbornly at the same spot, clearly unwilling to give in. The man had completely lost his patience. He signaled to the men behind him and shouted, "There's no time. Go, take him away." "Yes, sir." A few tall and burly mercenaries immediately stepped forward and surrounded Mu Lianjue. Mu Lianjue warily swept a glance at them. His eyes widened as his face turned pale. What are you doing?" Fourth Master Mu, sorry for the offense. As soon as that person finished speaking, a few people beside him immediately stepped forward, one on the left and one on the right, one in front and one behind, sandwiched him. One person held up one side of his body, and in a few moves, his hands were tied behind his back and handcuffed. The man rudely reached out and grabbed him by the collar. "Fourth Master, our time is limited. Since you're not cooperating, don't blame us for being merciless." Mu Lianjue struggled a little. "Let go of me. Be more polite. I'm the fourth master of the Mu family after all. What is the meaning of this? Don't be rash in front of us. Fourth Master Mu, you're really interesting. I don't care if you're the fourth master or the second master. There's no room for negotiation. Take him away." With that, the man waved his hand, and two mercenaries, one on each side of the man, carried him away with a few armed mercenaries protecting him from the front and back. When he left the base, Mu Lianjue glanced around, and was shocked to see that all the patrolling soldiers and sentinels were lying on the ground. He did not know if they were dead or alive. There were no signs of an intense struggle at the scene. It was obvious that they were all taken down in one move. Before Mu Lianjue could take a few more looks, his eyes and mouth were blindfolded, and he was pushed into an armed escort vehicle. He was caught off guard. Darkness enveloped his vision. He was unceremoniously pushed and fell onto the cold seat. His face was pressed against the cold and hard surface of the car, and he almost broke his teeth. He suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. Thinking back to what he had seen from the base, it was as if a bottomless pit had opened up in his heart, and he fell into endless despair. Just how capable was Mu Yaja to be able to take his woman away from Mu Linfeng's clutches? This was a military base, a strategic stronghold, and an extremely well-guarded drill ground. Usually it was a secret base that few people knew about. Hence, the defense was extremely strict. The capital's military was heavily guarded within a 100-mile radius. Chapter 1357. Even the important figures in the central government had to give him some face, not to mention the high-ranking officials in the government. When they saw him, they had to bow their heads and bow to him. Mu Yaja actually had the ability to take someone away right under Mu Linfeng's nose. Mu Lianjue shuddered at the thought of it. It seemed that he had underestimated this nephew of his. Since when did he have such great power? It must be said that Mu Linfeng and Mu Lianjue were indeed a little naive. If Mu Yaja wanted someone, how could Mu Linfeng's subordinates stop him? Mu Lianjue got into the car, but he did not know where the car was taking him. Was it hell? Or he did not dare to think too deeply about it. He only hoped that Mu Yaja would leave him some face and not be ruthless in everything. Did Mu Linfeng know that Mu Yaja had taken that person away? If he knew, would he rush over to save him? At this moment, in the hospital, Mu Sheng was lying on the bed, leaning weakly against the headboard. Wearing an oxygen mask, his bleary eyes were half opened with great difficulty. Like withered grass by the yellow spring, he was on the brink of death. Mu Yaja and Mu Linfeng sat facing each other on the left and right of the bed. They were in a silent confrontation. Mu Yaja's posture was leisurely and elegant. His eyes were indifferently looking out the window, as if he was quietly waiting for a certain result. Mu Linfeng looked at him silently, sizing him up from time to time. Similarly, he was also silent as he waited for news from his subordinates. He only felt that the man sitting in front of him had too many unfathomable things about him. Grandpa Mu, on the other hand, was quietly sizing them up. His condition had worsened and he could no longer speak. The three of them formed a very strange scene. The air in the spacious ward was tense and stifling. Especially when Mu Yaja sat in the ward, his cold and imposing aura made one breathless. After a long period of dead silence, as if a century had passed, a ringtone broke the silence. Mu Linfeng was shocked. With a swoosh, he looked at Mu Yaja warily. Mu Yaja picked up his phone and dialed a number. On the other end, a subordinate reported in a low voice, "Boss, the person is already in our hands." It was very quiet in the ward, so Mu Linfeng could hear the voice from the phone clearly. Mu Linfeng turned pale with fright and stood up agitatedly. Mu Yaja glanced at him coldly, then said into the phone, "Watch him, I'll be right there." "Yes, boss." Mu Yaja hung up the call and looked up, only to see his uncle's extremely ugly expression. It was frighteningly dark. He smiled leisurely and elegantly asked, "What's wrong, second uncle? You have him." Mu Linfeng was so angry that his lips trembled. He really wanted to know how his nephew managed to take someone away from the heavily guarded and heavily surrounded military base. "Second uncle, your hearing has always been good. You should have heard it just now." Mu Yaja smiled devilishly. There was a hint of arrogance and cynicism in his smile, but more than that, there was a hint of arrogance and brashness that he had never shown in front of his second uncle. Chapter 1358. All this while, Mu Yaja had always been reserved and calm in front of him. As a junior, he had a good grasp of his bearing, keeping his sharpness and arrogance to be humble and docile. Now, however, he no longer concealed himself and fully displayed the sharpness of a ruler. For a moment, Mu Linfeng actually felt that the domineering aura emanating from him was too dazzling. Must you be so heartless and ruthless? Was there no room for negotiation at all? Mu Linfeng looked at him bitterly, still trying to persuade him to stay. Mu Yaja glanced at his uncle's gloomy face and sneered, "Too lazy to bother with him. Yaja, you're too scary." Mu Linfeng shook his head in disappointment. I never thought that you were such a heartless person. How could you be so cruel to this extent? He's your fourth uncle. We share the same roots and are connected by blood. How can you not care about our relationship? He started to fear Muyaja in his heart. Today, he could get rid of him with his own hands. Then what about tomorrow? Would they use the same method to kill him? Since ancient times, the rich and powerful would kill their brothers and fathers for power. There were countless cases of brothers killing each other. Mu Linfeng began to suspect if Muyaja had such treacherous ambitions. Second Mu, don't flaunt your seniority and think too highly of yourself. I used to respect you as an elder, but don't use your status to oppress others and change the concept. Second Mu. Mu Linfeng was infuriated by his short form of address. How dare he call him Second Mu? After Mu Lianqing's death, no one in the Mu family had the seniority to call him Second Mu, except for Mu Sheng. This Muyaja clearly did not care about him at all. He was not giving him any face at all. Muyaja said coldly, so, second uncle, you also know about the concept of sharing the same roots and being connected by blood. I thought you've completely forgotten about it. What do you mean by that? Mu Linfeng glared at him fiercely. Muyaja said sternly, Fourth Mu is the one who killed his brothers and his father. For the sake of seizing power, he's willing to do such treacherous things. With him as an example, I'm just imitating him. What's wrong with that? Mu Linfeng was suddenly at a loss for words. What? You're not saying anything. Didn't you want to defend him? I'll give you this chance. Today I'll settle old and new scores with him. My father's death, my mother's death, Mu Qingqing's death, his instigation of Mu Wanru to poison Grandpa's medicine, and his assassination of my son. If I don't settle these scores with him, who else will I settle them with? Muyaja suddenly raised his eyes and swept them over with a piercing glare. Is it you? Second Mu. Mu Linfeng was forced to take 2 steps back by his chilly tone and fell into a chair. I've given you a chance. I've said before that it's your business to protect him. If you can't, you can only blame yourself for not being capable enough. Mu Linfeng was speechless. He could only shake his head and sigh. It seems that I'm really getting old. You're amazing. Chapter 1359. He cast a sidelong glance at him from the corner of his eye. His gaze was cold and threatening with a deep sense of disgust. Let bygones be bygones. Now that things had come to this, he had already let go of the grudges of the previous generation. Of all things, Mu Lianjue should never have touched his reverse scale. He should not have touched Yin Shishir, let alone Mu Yichen and Yin Tianyu. They were forbidden grounds that he could not touch. He thought of how Yin Shishir and Xiao Yichen were tortured by him, until they were covered in wounds. Then, he thought of how Yu Yu was almost separated from him forever by the assassin he had sent. Muyaja wished he could tear him into pieces, but even that would not be enough to appease his anger. Second Mu, you're being unfair. In your eyes, Fourth Mu is a brother and a brother. As for me, I'm just a pawn in your hands. That's why you can protect your brother and brother, but you don't need to care about a pawn's feelings. That's because a pawn only needs to listen to orders and doesn't need any extra feelings. Muyaja turned around and looked at him deeply. That's why, even if I'm in pain and despair, I shouldn't have fallen into your eyes. I don't want to be your pawn anymore. I have my feelings too. Fourth Mu has offended something he shouldn't have, so he naturally has to pay the price. Isn't that so? Mu Linfeng was stunned. Her embarrassment and anger, which had been exposed by the man, quickly surfaced on her face. Mu Linfeng's expression changed drastically. His hawk-like eyes brewed a terrifying storm as he bellowed, "Shut up!" Muyaja's lips curved into a half-smile expressionlessly. Did I say something wrong? Haven't I always been a pawn in your eyes? There's no need to care about your feelings. Second Mu, I've already done my best at this point. In the future, if you want me to show you some respect, don't push me too far. Bastard. You disgraceful thing, shut your mouth. Mu Linfeng had completely lost control. Raising the cane in his hand, he swung it at Mu Linfeng's shoulder viciously. Bang. A loud sound was heard. Muyaja didn't even try to dodge. The cane hit him on the shoulder and broke him in two. The remains of the cane flew out and smashed into the window, shattering it into pieces. Pa! Soon, the window was broken into pieces. Mu Linfeng's shoulders shuddered from the commotion. It was only when he calmed down that he realized what he had done. He actually used the mahogany cane in his hand to hit Mu Yaja on the shoulder. When the old man on the bed saw this scene, he was unable to say anything. He could only close his eyes in exhaustion and disappointment. Aside from feeling regret, he felt even more pity. The sorrow of a wealthy family was once again vividly displayed before his eyes. Mu Yaja stood in front of Mu Linfeng expressionlessly. He didn't seem to be in pain at all, as if the cane didn't hit him. However, the coldness in his eyes was like the thick snow in winter. I owe you for this strike. Now that things have come to this, it's time to repay your kindness. With that, he smiled coldly and turned to leave. Mu Linfeng watched him leave and slumped on the chair. Chapter 1360. The car sped along the road. It came to an abrupt halt when it reached the highway junction. Mu Lianjue nervously looked left and right, his heart in his throat. The road in front of the car was blocked by a mysterious troop. In front of them was an extended Bentley. Behind the Bentley were 5 armored vehicles. 3 rows of fully armed mercenaries formed a line, tightly blocking the road and completely blocking the way. Yun Tianyu sat elegantly in the back seat of the Bentley with a glass of bubbling cola in his hand. Like a gentleman, he gently sucked on the straw and took a sip. Beside him, Vermilion Bird lowered her body and whispered in his ear, "The car has been stopped. Check if it's Mu Lianjue himself in the car," he ordered coldly. Yes. Yu had already made preparations beforehand. He knew that Mu Lianjue would be escorted out of the country to San Francisco tomorrow morning, so he decided to detain him tonight. However, by the time his men arrived, Mu Lianjue had already been taken away. The scene was littered with wreckage. The soldiers in the station were all taken down in one move. They were not dead and were still breathing, but judging from their injuries, the kidnappers were well trained and skilled. They seemed to be the work of mercenaries. Yu immediately blocked all traffic and set up a strict guard at every intersection when he learned that Mu Lianjue had been kidnapped. What he did not know, however, was that it was Mu Yaja who had snatched his brother away. Sometimes, blood was a magical thing. It was unknown if the father and son had a tacit understanding, but they actually thought of the same thing. After the car was stopped, Deputy Zhou, Mu Yaja's subordinate, got out of the car. He could not help frowning at the scene before him. Just as he was in a daze, he saw a tall and handsome woman alight from the Bentley not far away. She had a head of neat blonde hair that was shaved to her ears. She wore a military vest that revealed her curvaceous figure. However, a cold and solemn murderous aura emanated from her body. It was like an invisible arrow shooting towards him. She took a few steps forward and the first thing she said was, "Who is the person in the car?" Vice Captain Zhou furrowed his brows. His expression was displeased, and he became vigilant. "Who are you? Cut the crap. The people in the car stay. All of you leave." The Vermilion Bird spoke. Her words contained a warning. Vice Captain Zhou's eyebrows furrowed even deeper. It was obvious that they wanted to snatch the person from his hands. This was really interesting. "Who are you?" "The people in the car were ordered to be taken away by our boss. We can't leave them behind." "I'm sorry, but I can't comply." Long-winded. The Vermilion Bird coldly rebuked. "Hand her over." Vice Captain Zhou frowned, but from the corner of his eye, he caught a glimpse of the armband on Vermilion Bird's arm. On the armband was the emblem of Mercenary Paradise. In an instant he was stunned. Mercenary Paradise. That was one of the top mercenary organizations in the world. They were actually from Mercenary Paradise. Vice Captain Zhou froze for a moment, then swept his eyes over the crowd. He saw that the other side had more than a dozen men and horses. Their battle array was vast, and their aura was intimidating. Mercenary Paradise was known as the top demonic force. Mercenaries from Mercenary Paradise were invincible. If they really wanted to fight, the situation would be one-sided. ***. Chapter 1361. Deputy Zhou was well aware that the mercenaries from Mercenary Paradise were formidable. Moreover, the other party had more than a dozen people. If they were to confront them head-on, It would be a strenuous and unrewarding task. Thus, he immediately signaled his men with his eyes to send a signal to the headquarters to send back the coordinates. On the other end, Vermilion Bird quickly caught sight of this small movement from the corner of her eye. She immediately took out her gun, nimbly loaded it, and swiftly fired. The bullet whizzed through the air and hit the wireless communicator in the man's hand with a loud bang. With unerring accuracy, it shattered into pieces and fell to the ground. The man was startled when the bullet scratched his palm, leaving a horrifying bloody mark. He raised his head in anger, only to see Vermilion Bird coldly putting away her gun with a disdainful smirk on her thin lips. Deputy Zhou flew into a rage out of humiliation. "What are you trying to do? Hand him over and leave." Vermilion Bird indifferently spat out these words. She stood tall in the cold wind, looking valiant. Her long, straight legs were strong and relaxed, and her cold eyes were like a wild cat in the forest, sparkling. Mu Lianjue, who was locked up in the car, did not know what was happening outside when he noticed that the car had stopped moving for a long time. He struggled to sit up and, with great effort, inched toward the car window. Arching his back, he used the friction of the car seat to remove the black cloth covering his eyes bit by bit. When he saw the scene outside through the window, his eyes widened in shock. Clearly, he was shocked by the scene before him. The two sides faced each other with swords drawn and soon fell into a stalemate. No one dared to act rashly. Both sides were mercenaries from top forces. Even if there was a gap in strength, it was not to the extent that it was too big. If they were to fight head-on, the gains would not make up for the losses. Deputy Zhou, who was also from the elite, had rich experience and been through hundreds of battles. He knew that biding his time and retreating in order to advance was the best way to do things. Although the wireless communicator was damaged, the signal was still sent out quickly. Mu Yaja was on his way to the scene when he received the signal. He could not help but frown when he learned that a mysterious team had appeared at the highway intersection and completely blocked off all escape routes. It seemed that they were going to kidnap someone. A mysterious team? Mu Yaja was surprised. The information he received was limited, so he did not send many people. However, all of them were elite soldiers from the world's top mercenary group. They were one of the troops that he had groomed, and their strength was not shallow. However, from the signal sent by Vice Captain Zhou's subordinate, it seemed that they had encountered some crisis. Mu Yaja was surprised. At the same time, he dispatched people as fast as he could. He even got a special car and rushed to the destination. Obviously, he did not know who had created this mysterious troop. Yin Tianyu had obviously underestimated Mu Yaja's ability. He thought that Mu Yaja was unaware of this matter. The news of Mu Lianjue's flight to San Francisco the next day was confidential information that he had obtained by hacking into his uncle's email. Mu Linfeng was clearly trying to cover for Mu Lianjue to leave the country. Naturally, Yu would not let Mu Lianjue go. One must know that once Mu Lianjue left the country, it would not be so easy to control him. There was no way he would let him go. Chapter 1362. Speaking of which, according to seniority, he seemed to be addressing Mu Lianjue as his fourth granduncle. He had to admit that his fourth granduncle's ruthlessness was an eye-opener for him. Killing one's brother and father was a cruel act that only happened in the royal family in ancient times, yet it happened right before his eyes. He would never let it go. However, the father-son pair had apparently overlooked a more important person, Mu Linfeng. When Mu Linfeng learned that Mu Yaja's men had abducted someone from the military base, he flew into a rage and quickly sent out a group of soldiers to chase after them. After leaving the hospital, he took a private car to the military base. According to the report from his subordinates, the base had been purged. The so-called purge meant that all the soldiers stationed at the base had been taken down. Fortunately, Mu Yaja had specifically instructed them to show mercy, so they did not deal too heavy a blow and did not cause too many casualties. Soon news came from the front line that several armed escort vehicles had been stopped by an equally mysterious force at the southern entrance of the Jingbei Expressway. The two sides were in a standoff, and the situation was in a stalemate. He immediately felt that something was amiss, so he immediately mobilized the local police force and made a call to the capital's military headquarters to dispatch another group of men to the southern entrance of the Jingbei Expressway. At the same time, Mu Yaja was also rushing to the destination. He was quite far away, so it would take him half an hour to reach the destination even if he hurried. On the way, Lu Jinyu gave him a call to inform him of this matter. Chief, Mu Linfeng has dispatched a group of men to the expressway. Mu Yaja quickly took this matter seriously. At first, he suspected that the mysterious troop that had blocked the convoy at the highway junction might be from Mu Linfeng's forces. However, when Lu Jinyu told him that Mu Linfeng had mobilized manpower from the military and rushed over, his heart skipped a beat. What was the origin of that mysterious force, then? Hence, he stepped on the accelerator and drove the car to the highest speed. He could not allow Mu Lianjue to leave the country under his watch. The car sped along the way, breaking countless rules and running countless red lights. However, his car had a military license plate, so even if the traffic police saw it, they would not chase after him. After all, the military had special privileges in certain aspects. It was important to note that the local police system and the military were separated, each doing their own thing. However, if the military carried out any special operations, the local police force and various forces would have to listen to the military's orders. This was the supreme privilege of the military. This was also the reason why Mu Linfeng had been in politics for many years instead of being in business, and had a prominent and stable position in the Mu family. If one were to ask who held the most prominent position in the family, it would be none other than Mu Linfeng. This was the reason why Mu Yaja had always been so respectful to him. As a bigwig with a military background, Mu's eyes. Even when Grandpa Mu was still the head of the family, his position in the Mu family was only second to one and above everyone else. Chapter 1363. Thus, when Mu Yaja openly rebelled against him, Mu Linfeng found it unbelievable and even flew into a rage out of humiliation. Inwardly, however, he thought that the brat had lost his mind to openly rebel against him for a wild woman. At the same time, the manpower from the special forces quickly gathered at the highway intersection. They were all fully armed and had excellent ammunition. Mu Linfeng ordered that no matter what, they had to bring the person back alive. No matter who the other party was, they had to pay a price if necessary. Upon receiving this order, these mercenaries carried sufficient ammunition and guns and rushed over with the determination to exchange fire. Yu clearly did not know about Mu Linfeng's handiwork, or that the latter had once again mobilized military forces from the mercenary groups. He remained in the car calmly and called Gong Jie. When Gong Jie found out that the men he had sent were in a deadlock with the other party, he sent more men and rushed over. The three parties were on their way to the same destination. On the surface, the suburbs of the capital looked calm and peaceful, but the game in the dark was already in an abyss of suffering and surging winds and clouds. Seeing that the other party was unwilling to hand over the person, Vermilion Bird no longer showed mercy. Expressionlessly, she turned around and took out her radio communicator, saying coldly, "They're not willing to hand over the person. Prepare to fire." Vice Captain Zhou was shocked. Could it be that the other party had more than a dozen people, and there was an ambush in the dark? For a moment, he looked around vigilantly, jittery at the slightest sound. Now that they were outnumbered, it was inevitable that they would be isolated and without help. However, just as Vermilion Bird's troops were about to fire, Mu Linfeng's men arrived. Vermilion Bird suddenly caught the sound of police sirens not far away. Instantly alert, she took out a pair of binoculars from her waist and agilely climbed onto the roof of the car to observe the distance. A few hundred meters away, she was shocked to see more than a dozen military vehicles, with dozens of police cars clearing the way, speeding over from the south entrance. From afar, red and blue lights flashed continuously. The scene of dozens of vehicles driving over was truly spectacular. Yu turned around. At the same time, he keenly heard the sirens from afar and became alert. "Vermilion Bird, what's the situation?" "There seems to be a situation." Vermilion Bird jumped down from the roof of the car and reported to him. "There are more than a dozen military vehicles coming here. I suspect that they are from the special group." Mu Linfeng. This was the only possibility that Yu could think of. "I suspect it's him." After all, other than Mu Linfeng, no one else in the entire capital had the authority to deploy so many people from a special grade corporation. While Zhu Ke and Yu were reporting to each other, The military vehicles quickly arrived and completely sealed off the South Pass Road. They surrounded Zhu Ke and Vice Captain Zhou's troops. Then a few mercenaries with guns in their hands walked down from several military vehicles. These mercenaries were different from the soldiers stationed at the station just now. Between their iron-like faces, there was a cold-blooded valiance unique to the country's machinery. Tisk. Yu suddenly frowned and smacked her lips. Vermilion Bird said in a deep voice, "Don't be afraid, President Yin. I'm here." "No," Yu said calmly. "Then, I think I drank too much Coke. The roots of my teeth are a little sore," Yu said faintly. Zhu Ke was instantly speechless and broke out in a cold sweat. Chapter 1364. She thought that the little guy was scared and nervous, so she did not expect him to say such a ridiculous thing. Suddenly, Yu uttered a wise saying in a serious tone. "Kids should drink less cola." With that, he put the cola aside. His tone was as mature as a veteran. Vermilion Bird. This squishy dumpling could still say such dry humor at such a critical juncture. That was enough. Yu rolled down the car window and scanned the scene outside. His face regained its usual coldness as he reminded. "Vermilion Bird, you don't have to send us off if it's not necessary. Let's see what's going on." "Yes, I understand." Vermilion Bird nodded and obeyed. The troops dispatched by Mu Linfeng quickly sealed off the road and surrounded the scene. They took full control of the situation. What Yu did not expect, however, was that Mu Linfeng would show up at the scene in person. According to his original plan, he would arrange for Mu Lianjue to stay at the base and get him to the airport at dawn, so that he could board a flight to San Francisco. Just as he had expected, Mu Yaja had indeed made a move. What he did not expect, though, was that the man's men were so capable. With just a group of a dozen or so people, they easily dealt with the soldiers stationed at the base and escaped with their captives. Mu Linfeng felt extremely humiliated. The soldiers guarding the base were all elite troops and were awe-inspiring. How could he not be angry when they were trampled on by a small group of mercenaries? Hence, he had specially selected the elites from the special forces this time. Each of them was tall, strong, well-trained, and outstanding. Once the car stopped and he gained full control, he alighted from it under the protection of the soldiers. Once he got out of the car, he put on airs and scanned the surroundings. His face darkened. Someone immediately came forward to report after observing his expression. "Sir, the scene is under control. We're at your command." "Where is he?" "He's in the car." His subordinate stood straight at the side and pointed at the armed escort vehicle parked not far away. Yu sneered inwardly when he saw the man through the window. This second granduncle of his was quite powerful. Could it be that people with a bit of a special background all had this kind of character? Before doing anything, they would put on airs for others to see. He did have a bit of an air about him. Seeing that the scene was under control, Deputy Zhou's men did not dare to act rashly. It was not because of anything other than the fact that they would not gain anything if they went head-on. Previously, Mu Yaja had given the order to bring Mu Lianjue back. He wanted to see him, dead or alive. As mercenaries, their employer's orders were absolute and could not be disobeyed. Therefore, they treated this order like an imperial edict. However, the current situation was somewhat outside of the plan. Therefore, Deputy Zhou and the rest kept their cool and stayed in their original positions. Before Mu Yaja's reinforcements arrived, they would remain sober and not act rashly. Mu Linfeng sent someone to check Deputy Zhou's car and bring Mu Lianjue out. Deputy Zhou gnashed his teeth in hatred at the arrogant and despotic manner of his men. Chapter 1365. Mu Linfeng suddenly noticed the elongated Bentley parked at the side. Puzzled, he took a look at the license plate, which started with capital AG6, and was stunned. Capital AG6 license plates were rarely issued. Most of them were issued by the central government to international political figures, or people under special protection. Cars with this license plate could pass unimpeded no matter where they went. Even if it was a central non-high, they could drive straight in without stopping. This meant that they had supreme authority. In the capital, the level of authority was a symbol of status. Thus, a simple license plate could reflect a lot of things. Mu Linfeng was astonished to find out who was sitting in the Bentley. His subconscious reaction was to check the authenticity of the license plate. This was because even with his qualifications, it was impossible for him to obtain such a high-level license plate. The car Yu was in was issued by the central government to Gongjia. Gongjia had come to the capital this time to meet some mysterious leaders and negotiate some special deals. Gongjia was born in the arms industry and maintained close ties with various countries' political figures. A person like him would be specially received by any country's leader. Thus, every time he came, the central government would receive him with high standards and make special arrangements for him. Mu Linfeng was suspicious, so he led his men forward to see who was sitting in the car. Alas, the vermilion bird raised a hand to stop him the moment he stepped forward and held his outstretched hand tightly. His vermilion bird's strength was too terrifying. Even Mu Linfeng could not take it and frowned in pain. Mu Linfeng's expression changed, and the atmosphere became even more tense. Seeing that someone dared to act rashly in front of Mu Linfeng, the people beside him shouted, "How dare you? Who are you? How dare you act rashly here? Take your hand away." Vermilion Bird looked up coldly and did not move at all. Her handsome face was extremely cold. She only had one master and only listened to Yu's orders. She did not need to listen to anyone else. Vermilion Bird did not let go. Instead, she used even more strength and strength. Unable to bear her pain, Mu Linfeng frowned in pain. However, due to his status, he had no choice but to maintain his dignified posture. His sharp, eagle-like eyes shot a warning at the Vermilion Bird. The adjutant standing beside him immediately went forward and shouted, "I told you to let go. Don't be rash, didn't you hear me? Let go." With that, he tried to break free from Vermilion Bird's grip. Unexpectedly, Vermilion Bird easily caught his hand and twisted it. With a crack, his wrist was broken. The man groaned and endured the pain, and broke out in cold sweat. At this moment of confrontation, the window of the Bentley suddenly rolled down. Vermilion Bird let go. "Don't hurt the relationship between me and second uncle." His voice was childish, but it was steady. Surprised, Mu Linfeng looked into the car, and saw Yu sitting in the back seat expressionlessly. If it were not for his youthful appearance, one would not be able to tell that he was a 7-year-old child. However, when Mu Linfeng saw his delicate face, the latter turned pale with fright. Ichen. Chapter 1366. Yu coldly opened his eyes. A frosty glint flashed across his eyes, and at the same time his pink lips curled into a cold smirk. "Second granduncle, it's our first time meeting. Nice to meet you." The moment he opened his mouth, Mu Linfeng quickly realized his identity. He was probably the other son that Yun Shishir gave birth to when she was a surrogate mother for Mu Yaja. Just based on his appearance alone, he was very similar to Xiao Yichen. However, the difference was that his extraordinary bearing and gestures were somewhat similar to Mu Yaja's. He had an aura that was different from other children of his age. He was noble, cold, and elegant. His black and white eyes were distinct, and his eyelashes were thick. His adorable face was even more intimidating because of his cold expression. Mu Linfeng suddenly snorted. "Humph. So it's Yaja's little b***st**rd outside. What are you doing here?" When Yu heard that, he laughed instead of getting angry. He snorted a few times, but he could not be bothered with the derogatory term. He did not get out of the car and just sat there elegantly, looking at him calmly. Mu Linfeng, on the other hand, was enraged by his arrogance. While he was furious, he was also shocked. He did not expect that a 7-year-old child would have such an extraordinary bearing. At the same time, when he realized what this child had just called him, he coldly said, "Little b***st**rd. Take back the way you called me just now." Mu Linfeng ordered. Yu turned to look at him disapprovingly with a raised brow. Mu Linfeng scornfully said, "Why don't you take a look at your status? You don't have the right to call me second granduncle." When Yu heard that, he was silent for a moment before he calmly asked, "Right? What do you mean by right?" What do you think? Don't think that just because you're Yaja's son, you can climb up the Mu family's social ladder. That mother of yours has the ambition of a wolf. She secretly hid the Mu family's heir, and even wanted to rely on her son to climb up the Mu family's social ladder. Tell her that this is just a dream. Don't even think about it. The arrogant and disdainful words resounded in his ears like thunder. The disdain in his words was obvious. Clearly, Mu Linfeng rejected the child from the bottom of his heart. Don't think that just because you're a child of the Mu family and have the blood of the Mu family flowing in your veins, you can openly step into the Mu family's doorstep. You don't have the qualifications. Mu Linfeng's voice was cold to the extreme. Yu found it funny. She couldn't help but smile. Her pink lips curled into a disdainful smile. Her eyes were cold. I don't know how high the Mu family's branch is. However, I've seen how thick-skinned second granduncle is. Haha. What did you say? Mu Linfeng was furious. What do you mean? I meant it literally. Why? Second granduncle is so knowledgeable, but you can't even understand basic human language? You use words were like pearls, and the ridicule in her tone was equally unrestrained. You, Mu Linfeng scolded. B***SD**RD. I'm here. You don't have the right to act rashly. Chapter 1367. These words completely enraged Mu Linfeng, to the extent that he could not restrain his anger in front of so many people. He lost his poise and scolded, "Little bastard." Mu Linfeng was infuriated because he detested Yu. If not for Yu's appearance, perhaps his plan would not have been completely disrupted. His appearance was the biggest failure of this plan. If not for him, he would not have been in such a passive position. Yu smiled elegantly when he heard this. It was as if he was not angered by Mu Linfeng's ungentlemanly insult. He only said meaningfully, "I finally understand what that saying means." Mu Linfeng glanced at him coldly from the corner of his eye. However, Yu continued unhurriedly, "I've been working so hard to stay away from idiots like you." Then, the little lad glanced at him expressionlessly from the corner of his eyes, as if he was implying that Mu Linfeng was the person he was referring to. He rarely swore, but since Mu Linfeng had humiliated him, why couldn't he humiliate him back? After being insulted again and again, it wasn't his style if he didn't show them some face. Mu Linfeng's face darkened as soon as he said that. Even a ghost could tell that this brat was trying to humiliate someone with his words. "How dare you?" Mu Linfeng's lips twitched in anger. He glared fiercely at him, trying to intimidate this 7-year-old boy with his authority. "If you dare to be rash again, I'll do you right here and now." "Really? Second granduncle, do you have that much authority?" Yu's pink lips curled into a gentlemanly smile. "What are you going to do about me?" "Haha. Let's wait and see." "Haha. I'll do you for the sake of the Mu family, you vile spawn. The Mu family won't allow a vile spawn like you to sully our dignity." As Mu Linfeng spoke, he waved his hand. The adjutant beside him whipped out a gun from his waist and raised his wrist. The black muzzle was instantly aimed between Yu's brows. Yu sat calmly in the car, neither shocked nor angry. Even when the cold muzzle was aimed at her forehead, she did not lose her composure. Her calm demeanor shocked Mu Linfeng even more. This child at such a young age had an extraordinary spirit. Vermilion Bird looked up and saw the adjutant taking out his gun. In the next second, she raised her Desert Eagle and aimed it at Mu Linfeng's forehead. The moment she raised her hand, all the soldiers around her raised their guns and aimed at her. They were on high alert. If Vermilion Bird made the slightest movement, they would be ready to shoot at any time. "Protect the chief," the adjutant shouted. The order had already been issued, and all the soldiers were on full alert. "Second granduncle, don't blame me for not reminding you of something." Yu sat in the car with his eyes lowered. At this moment, the surroundings were quiet, so his tender voice sounded especially clear and powerful. "If you touch a strand of my hair, you'll be shot into a hornet's nest in the next second." After saying that coldly, Yu pursed her pink lips and smiled elegantly. She narrowed her eyes and smiled innocently and adorably. "Do you want to try?" In her seemingly innocent smile, her eyes were as clear as a fawn's, but there were too many things that made people's hearts palpitate. Chapter 1368. Mu Linfeng's lips stiffened, and he pursed his lips tightly. He was once a ruthless character who had been through desperate situations. Hence, when Yu said those words, he subconsciously sensed a murderous aura lurking around them. It was surging in the dark and chilling. There was actually an ambush. He keenly sensed that there might still be a troop in the surroundings that was silently lurking in the dark at this moment. He suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. Half of his life in the military made him realize at once that there might be a sniper ambushing them a few hundred meters away. Perhaps there was a sniper hiding in the dark, aiming at the space between his eyebrows with his sniper scope open. That was why the child had said those words so carelessly. If you touch a strand of my hair, you'll be shot into a hornet's nest in the next second. His mind was in a mess. His nerves were all over the place. It was not because of anything else other than Yu sitting in the car calmly. Even if he saw the child's tender face and innocent smile, his every move exuded extraordinary charisma. Could these people be his men? These mercenaries, which consisted of more than 10 people, were all listening to a 7-year-old child's orders. Mu Linfeng felt that his understanding had been overturned. His cold eyes swept past Vermilion Bird and sized her up before his gaze slowly landed on Yin Tianyo's face. This child was not ordinary. He resembled Mu Yaja when he was young, but as a son, he was more ruthless and mature than his father. He was so young, yet he already had such charisma. Apart from being shocked, he was also wary of him. He was even more certain that this child was an extremely dangerous person and must not be allowed to live. Initially, he thought that this was Mu Yaja's force. When he first saw the child sitting in the car, he thought that he was just good with his mouth. However, Mu Linfeng was half a beat slower to react, and his heart instantly froze. He came back to his senses and suddenly realized that this child was not such a simple character at all. He could not figure it out. How could he have imagined that a child could have such power? How did he do it? Put the gun down, Vermilion Bird warned coldly. As Yu's secret guard, she would not allow anyone to pose a threat to Yu in front of her. She warned sternly as her gaze shot out like a sharp sword. Even the experienced adjutant could not help but be intimidated by her gaze. His hand, which was holding the gun tightly, trembled, but he still did not put it down. The Vermilion Bird didn't say another word. She suddenly stepped forward, swept her long leg, and gave a high kick. With a heavy muffled sound, she kicked his hand that was holding the gun. The gun flew out of his hand. At the same time, the soldier at the side saw her move and wanted to shoot her. Vermilion Bird's eyes. Kill. Before the soldier could open fire. The atmosphere at the scene was completely tense, and the sound of loading rose and fell one after another. Vermilion Bird spun around, but in a flash, she appeared behind Mu Linfeng like a specter in the next second. She pointed the gun at the back of his head and bellowed, "Who dares to move?" The air seemed to have frozen, and everyone held their breaths. Chapter 1369. The entire process took less than 5 seconds. Vermilion Bird's movements were so nimble that it made one's scalp tingle. Fast. As fast as lightning. It made one's heart beat faster. They had already experienced Vermilion Bird's ability, with just a glance. No one dared to be sure that their movements were faster than the bullets in her pistol. Hence, no one dared to make a move the moment she gave her order. Yu raised a brow and shrugged innocently. She rebuked, "Everyone be obedient. Vermilion Bird is very fierce. If anyone disobeys, the bullets won't have eyes." Mu Linfeng's face darkened further. His son's arrogance made him gnash his teeth in hatred, but he could do nothing to him in this situation. In fact, looking at the scene, Mu Linfeng's men had the advantage in numbers. There were at least a dozen cars worth of military equipment. In terms of headcount, they did not lose to Yin Tianyu. The reason why he dared not act rashly was that Yu had arranged for a sniper to ambush him in the dark. Perhaps someone was aiming at the space between his eyebrows right now. With Vermilion Bird behind him, even if he had the advantage in numbers, he would not be able to gain any benefits. Mu Linfeng dared not make a move, and the situation came to a standstill. "What do you mean by this?" Mu Linfeng snorted. "Looks like you don't know your place. Do you know what will happen to you if you do this? Second uncle has a high position and a noble status. I know it very well." Yu smiled faintly. "It's just that, second uncle, you're the one who doesn't know my place, not me. Do you understand?" "What do you mean?" "Nothing," Yu casually said. I just hope that second uncle won't interfere in my affairs. I'll give you a chance now. Take your men and leave immediately. I won't hurt a single strand of your hair. However, there's one person who must stay. Mu Linfeng frowned when he heard that. Without thinking, he knew who the person Yu wanted him to stay was. It seemed that this lad was here for fourth Mu, too. At that moment, he suddenly realized what Yu had said. Second granduncle, you're the one who hasn't figured out my identity, not me. Do you understand? Did he not know who he was? Who was this child? For a moment, Mu Linfeng could not figure it out. Thinking about it again and again, he felt a chill from the bottom of his feet. However, he did not lower himself and continued to put on airs. With a cold face he said, I should be the one saying this to you. Have some self-awareness and retreat with your men. Then, I won't argue with you about what happened today. However, despite putting on airs, Mu Linfeng still showed a trace of weakness. Unlike his aggressive attitude earlier, he did not have much confidence in his words now. Yu did not give him a way out. You're kidding. His lips curled up mockingly, and a trace of disdain appeared on his tender little face. If second uncle insists on interfering, why don't you give it a try? I'd like to see how you're going to take him away from me. A trace of viciousness flashed across Mu Linfeng's eyes. His face darkened and then turned green. He could neither advance nor retreat. If he really left Mu Lianjue here, and left in a sorry state, not only would his dignity be tarnished, but he would also become a laughingstock in front of this young man. If he really wanted to protect and take him away, it would be harder than ascending to the heavens. Chapter 1370. It seemed that it would be more difficult than ascending to the heavens if he really wanted to protect and take her away by force. At the same time, they were in a deadlock like this. The scene before him was actually easily suppressed by a child, causing his face to heat up even more. It was very embarrassing. Who exactly are you? Mu Linfeng stared at him intently, his eyes as sharp as an eagle's. Yu retorted calmly and elegantly. Why should I tell you? Mu Linfeng was stunned for a moment before he snorted. What an arrogant attitude. Yu raised a brow. You don't have the right to ask about my identity. Mu Linfeng was even more stunned. Yu said sternly, hand her over obediently. However, take your men and retreat. Otherwise, you won't be able to leave. With that he raised his head. His eyes were no longer as clear as before, and were now dark and gloomy. Don't blame me for not reminding you, second granduncle. I want this person. If you stop me, you won't have a good ending. Young man, aren't you being too arrogant with your words? Mu Linfeng's words were clearly lacking in confidence. Yu could not be bothered with him anymore. Vermilion Bird stood behind him like a stone statue, unmoving. The gun in her hand was raised, and the cold, black muzzle was aimed at him like an endless abyss. It was as if he would be mercilessly devoured if he made the slightest move. Mu Linfeng glanced at her, but from his angle, he happened to see Mercenary Paradise's epaulette on her shoulder. He was shocked. Mercenary Paradise was famous, so he had naturally heard of it. It was said that this organization was a mercenary group created by the Hurricane Group. They were a mercenary group from Mercenary Paradise, and had extraordinary strength. Mu Linfeng's gaze deepened as he looked at Yu. What exactly was this child's identity? After a long silence that felt like a century, Mu Linfeng turned his face slightly and glanced sideways at Mu Lianjue, who was standing not too far away, with a hint of struggle in his eyes. Mu Lianjue turned to look at his brother as well. He could see the hesitation and struggle on his face. It was obvious that he was hesitating, and was weighing the pros and cons in his heart. Second brother. Mu Lianjue's lips trembled in agitation as he screamed at the top of his lungs. Take me with you. You can't leave me here. He wasn't afraid of death. There were some unknown things that were even more frightening and terrifying than death. He didn't know what would happen to him if he fell into Mu Yage's hands. He didn't dare to think about it. Plus, he was unwilling to accept it. He was unwilling to lose just like that. Upon hearing his voice, Mu Linfeng frowned and felt a sense of irritation rise within him. This thing is a hindrance. Unable to accomplish anything, but good at spoiling things. It seemed that this was Fourth Mu's fate. Even if Mu Linfeng was unwilling to admit it, He did not want to throw his life away for nothing. Although he did not believe that this 7-year-old child could do anything to him, looking at the situation before him and thinking about Yu Yu's warning in his heart, he was ultimately defeated and did not dare to gamble with his life. He was surprised that this child had such power and ability, but his heart also palpitated at the deterrence in the child's words. He did not quite believe it, but he did not dare to doubt it. Chapter 1371. Mu Linfeng sucked in a deep breath of cold air and said in an extremely pathetic voice, "Fine. I'll take my men away." "No." Mu Lianjue exclaimed the moment he finished speaking. "Second brother, do you really believe that child's words? He's just a 7-year-old child. How can he scare you? Second brother, he's just a child. How can you believe his words?" Mu Linfeng reprimanded, "Shut up." Mu Linfeng did not want to waste his breath on him. He was already embarrassed from retreating in such a sorry state. Now his brother's questioning made him even more embarrassed. He had been rebuffed time and time again, especially by this 7-year-old child, who did not leave him any face at all. He no longer had any face left. Mu Lianjue's few words had completely stripped him of what little face he had left. Thus he ordered coldly, "Retreat." The moment he said that, the soldiers at the scene withdrew their stance. Mu Linfeng turned around and walked toward the car. Mu Lianjue immediately ran toward him, blocked his path, and grabbed his shoulder. "Second brother, are you really so heartless? Are you going to leave me here just because of that child's one-sided words?" Mu Linfeng sneered and retorted, He's just a child. Why are you so flustered?" Mu Lianjue was taken aback by this unexpected slap in the face. In fact, even though he was facing a 7-year-old child, he felt an inexplicable fear from the bottom of his heart. It was just that he was unwilling to admit it. He was actually afraid of a child. He was afraid of a 7-year-old child. Mu Linfeng brushed his hand away and was about to leave. Seeing that he really did not care about him anymore, Mu Lianjue's heart twisted with hatred as a sinister and dark rage surfaced on his face. He abruptly turned around and dashed forward to grab Mu Linfeng's shoulder from behind. Following the momentum, he turned around and stuck close to him. His left hand gripped the man's throat while his right swiftly snatched the gun from Mu Linfeng's waist and pressed it against the latter's temple. In just a few seconds, he had turned the tables on the man. "Second brother, since you're so heartless, don't blame me for being ruthless." Grabbing his throat with one hand and pressing the gun against his temple with the other, Mu Lianjue bellowed malevolently, "Back off, all of you. Step back." Mu Linfeng was greatly taken aback. He did not expect that his nephew would dare to do this. Did he think that he could escape unscathed by using him as a hostage? His heart turned cold. He cursed in his heart. This heartless and unscrupulous bastard. To think that he had cared about the decades of brotherhood that he had given him advice to find a way out for him. He had even gone so far as to fall out with Muyaja. In the end, he had repaid his kindness with ingratitude. "Bastard! What are you trying to do?" Mu Linfeng roared in shock. "Let go! Idiot! Second brother. If we're going to die, let's die together." Mu Lianjue's face turned livid as if he had gone mad. His eyes, in particular, were bloodshot. His voice was as shrill as a malicious spirit's. Chapter 1372. The scene went out of control once more. No one had expected things to develop in this direction. After a moment of stunned silence, the crowd went on alert and aimed their guns at Mu Lianjue. His lips curled into a bloodthirsty smirk as he tightened his grip on Mu Linfeng's throat. His knuckles tightened as he pressed the gun muzzle against the latter's temple. He was ready to fire. "Tell them to put down their guns," he threatened. Mu Linfeng remained silent. His face was flushed red from suffocation. But even so, his lips remained tightly pursed and he did not loosen his grip. "You really think I won't dare to kill you, don't you?" Mu Lianjue's voice grew colder. "At most, I'll drag you down to hell with me if I die. Tell them to put down their guns. Do you hear me? Do you hear me? Musi, are you crazy? Are you?" Mu Linfeng spat out a few words with difficulty as he glared at him with bloodshot eyes. Like an enraged beast, he flew into a rage. Mu Lianjue sneered. "Second Mu, cut the crap. I told you to order them to put away their guns. Do you hear me? I don't have the patience. Tell them to put away their guns. Put away their guns. As he spoke, he tightened his grip on Mu Linfeng's throat and exerted more force with his fingers, as if he wanted to stab the latter's throat. Mu Linfeng grunted in pain and struggled for a while before raising his voice. Put away your guns. The moment he gave the order, his subordinates exchanged glances. However, no one dared to disobey Mu Linfeng's orders. Thus they all put away their guns. Give me a car. Mu Lianjue issued a second order, but this time, he was like a trapped beast on the verge of death. Mu Linfeng gritted his teeth, angry at his cowardice, but more than that, he hated himself for having misjudged him. Yu Yu burst into laughter when she saw this scene. It was rare to see a dog-eat-dog scene. Today, however, he had seen what a real dog-eat-dog fight was. The flood rushed against the Dragon King's temple, and they were fighting against each other. Had Mu Lianjue lost his mind? Did he think that he could escape unscathed just like this? Dream on. Just as Yu Yu was about to open the door and get out of the car, Lisa suddenly grabbed his hand and shook her head at him. Danger. She spat out 2 words. Yu Yu smiled and said calmly, What's there to be afraid of? You'll protect me. While Lisa was still in a daze, Yu Yu had already pushed open the door and stepped out of the car. The scene fell into a stalemate, and the air froze. Mu Lianjue held Mu Linfeng hostage as he yelled, Give me a car. Did you hear that? Prepare the car for me. Just as he finished speaking, he caught a glimpse of Yu Yu getting out of the car from the corner of his eye. He stepped on the ground and stood up straight. Then a snow-white and adorable face appeared in front of him. With his hands behind his back, Yu Yu stood obediently before him like an elegant gentleman. He cocked his head and smiled innocently. Fourth granduncle, we've just met and you're already in a hurry to leave. Don't you want to sit down and have a cup of tea? His voice was immature and tender, and at the same time, it was still childish. However, his tender voice revealed a strand of coldness that caused one's hair to stand on end, and it froze one's heart. Chapter 1373. Mu Lianjue snorted. His eyes narrowed dangerously as he met Yu Yu's gaze. His face, however, was as cold as a snake's. Don't call me fourth granduncle, he said in disgust and then sneered. The plan failed this time because I was careless. The blunder of the whole plan was that I didn't expect Mu Yaja to have trained 2 capable sons. If I had known, I wouldn't have ended up in this state. Mu Linfeng, who was being held in his hands, kept struggling. Seeing him struggle, Mu Lianjue bellowed, Behave yourself. Don't move. I'm warning you. I don't have the patience to pester you now. If you don't behave yourself, don't blame me for not giving you face. What you've done now shows that you don't give me any face at all, said Mu Linfeng hatefully. Mu Lianjue laughed sinisterly when he heard that. Blame me? You're the one who didn't care about your brotherly ties. You actually insisted on leaving me here just now. Why? Second brother, you're actually afraid of a child. How many people will laugh at you if this gets out? The second head of the Mu family is actually intimidated by a 7-year-old child. I think you've lived half your life in vain. Shut up. Mu Linfeng said angrily. Fourth Mu, this is a sin you created. You should bear it yourself. What do you mean by I didn't care about my brotherly ties? You're the one with a heart of stone. It's you who murdered Liancheng. It's you who harmed Ishan. It's also you who poisoned the old man's medicine. You're the one who did all these treacherous deeds. You're the one who's truly heartless. To think that I thought that you and I were born from the same roots and are connected by blood. In the end, you're actually accusing me. Fourth Mu, you're too disappointing. Are you blaming me for this? Mu Lianjue lost control of himself and shouted. Second brother, are you blaming me for this? Back then, if you hadn't colluded with the elders to support Mu Yaja, would I have ended up in this state? You wouldn't have ended up in this state. You're regretting it now, aren't you? Hehe. The organization that he had painstakingly nurtured turned against him in the end. The chess pieces that you had painstakingly set up, the chess pieces that you had painstakingly nurtured, and what happened in the end? This pawn doesn't listen to you at all. All of this, this vast Mu family empire, should have belonged to me. Originally, all of this could have changed for the better. In my hands, the Mu group will become even more powerful and majestic. However, you actually supported a chess piece to rise to the top. Haha. Mu heir, it seems that this is also your ambition. You want to use Mu Yaja as a puppet to take over the vast territory of the Mu clan. The more Mu Lianjue spoke, the darker Mu Linfeng's face became. He bellowed. Shut up. What? Was he angry out of humiliation? What I said is the truth. In terms of ambition, how can I compare to you? Mu Lianjue narrowed his eyes, his voice sinister. His voice was incomparably cold, revealing a bone-chilling hatred. If it weren't for your foolishness, I wouldn't have ended up in this state. Second Mu, if I must die here tonight, then all of you will have to die with me. How foolish. Fourth Mu, you're really too disappointing. Mu Linfeng shook his head and sighed, his face full of disappointment. Chapter 1374. Mu Linfeng only found it laughable. His lips twitched for a while before he said coldly, I only know one thing. The evils committed by the heavens can be defied. The evils we bring upon ourselves are the hardest to bear. Do you think that you can completely shirk your responsibility by saying this? Or do you think that I'll let you off just because you said this? Wishful thinking. Mu Lianjue laughed sinisterly. At this moment, he was already in a state of madness. Mu Linfeng felt a chill in his heart. The evening wind kept blowing a bleak chill, but it could not overcome the coldness in his heart. His lips curled up as the mockery in his eyes turned into helplessness. He let out a long sigh, helplessness appearing on his weathered and battered face. Fourth Mu, as your elder brother, I only have one piece of advice for you. Stop it while it's still early. What you're doing is meaningless. You shouldn't have done that back then either. Do you know that what you did was akin to patricide? It's treason. All the more you shouldn't have done it now. I don't want to hear all this from you. What's the point? Mu Lianjue's eyes reddened. The position of the Mu family's head was supposed to be mine. It was mine. Do you know how long I've worked to become the Mu family's head? Do you know how hard I've been living for the past few decades? That old fart, however, negated all my hard work and effort with just a few words. Then, what's the point of all my hard work all these years? What about you? You actually supported Mu Yaja to become the head. Was I not even comparable to a 20-year-old kid back then? You're gravely mistaken about that. You're merely gauging the heart of a gentleman with a cautious heart. Mu Linfeng paused, his face twitching a few times before he continued. I admit that I did neglect your feelings when I nurtured Yaja and supported him to become the head of the family. You're also right about part of the reason why I nurtured him to become my power. My motives were indeed impure and selfish. However, it's definitely not what you said. At that time, the Mu family's power was changing, and I wanted to stabilize it. That's why I chose this child. In fact, in my eyes, Yaja was an outstanding child. Facts have proven that I wasn't wrong. This child is indeed very outstanding, better than you. There's no doubt about that. Thus, even now that he's gone against my wishes, I don't regret standing up for him and supporting him. As you can see, the Mu group has been growing stronger and stronger in his hands. The changes in the Mu group were obvious to all. Back then, if it weren't for him, the Mu group wouldn't have been able to survive that crisis unscathed. My heart is with Mu group, and Mu group is the most important. Perhaps to you, these words may sound a bit pompous, but they are my true thoughts. If the Mu group can become a core business empire in his hands, I will have fulfilled my wish in this life. Mu Lianjue's eyes narrowed in anger as the corners of his lips twitched. His face looked especially hideous as his eyes slowly coiled around his neck like a venomous snake. What a great idea. Mu heir, if you say you have no selfish motives, who would believe you? You don't have to say such high-sounding words here. Chapter 1375. No matter what you do now, there's no turning back. It's time for you to pay back your sins. I know that I've been utterly defeated. Yes, I've failed. Still, do you think I'll let you off just because you said this? There was a hint of hysteria and madness in his smile, as if he had been possessed by a demon. Even if I'm going to die here tonight, you'll die with me and be buried with me. This was his character. Even if he was destroyed, he would drag others down to hell with him. At the very least, It would not be a loss if he dragged Mu Linfeng down with him. If he could drag Yun Tianyu down with him, then this deal would be worth it. Mu Lianjue opened his bloodshot eyes and stared fixedly at Yu Yu, who was standing in front of him, with a sinister smile. Yu Yu, who was standing in front of him with his hands behind his back, was as elegant as a little gentleman. He had a delicate and handsome face, and was as adorable as snow. His features were extremely similar to Yin Shishir's and similarly Muyaja's charm. This child was Yin Shishir's true love and Muyaja's most beloved son. Since Muyaja wanted to destroy him, he would not let him off either. If he wanted to die, he would not let Muyaja have an easy time either. At the thought of this, his lips trembled, and a hard object could be vaguely seen squirming under his lips. Suddenly, he hooked his tongue and bit on a remote control device in his mouth. A maniacal hatred flashed across his eyes. Yu Yu was startled by his sudden action. He furrowed his brows in puzzlement. However, when he saw the remote control device between his lips, his heart skipped a beat and his face froze. What was that? It was a small remote control device. It was pocket-sized, yet he had been holding it in his mouth all this time. What is this? He questioned in a low voice, full of wariness. Yin Tianyu, you're so smart. You should be able to guess what this is, right? Mu Lianjue's eyes were bloodshot as he held the remote in his hand. Come here, and I'll tell you what this is. Yu Yu frowned and said coldly, why should I go there? Mu Lianjue smiled sinisterly and spat. Of course. If I press this button, you will lose your dear mommy and brother forever. Yu Yu was stunned. Her face turned pale and she asked in disbelief. What did you say? What? You don't believe me? Mu Lianjue's eyes were filled with mockery as he gripped the remote control tightly in his hand. His face was full of viciousness as he bellowed hysterically. He. I have already sent someone to plant an explosive device in your house. If I press this button, there will be a bang. Take a guess. What will become of your gentle mommy and adorable brother? He sneered as he enjoyed the sight of Yun Tianyu's face, which was constantly changing color. He smugly said, with one explosion, they'll be brutally blasted into a bloody mess. Their heads will be separated from their bodies, and they'll die without a burial place. Yu Yu's face turned ghastly white in an instant. Mu Linfeng's eyes were filled with disbelief when he heard this. He was crazy. This person was completely deranged. Mu Lianjue was crazy. How could he do such a crazy thing? Chapter 1376. Vermilion Bird sized up Mu Lianjue's sinister expression and hurried to Yu Yu's side. Squatting down, she whispered into his ear. Director Yun, calm down. Don't believe him so easily. This man might be trying to trick you. She told him all the worries in her heart. She did not know what he was holding in his hand either. Could that button really be a remote control device for the explosion? No one knew, and no one knew the truth. Perhaps what he said was true. As long as he pressed the button, his home would instantly explode into a sea of fire with an earth-shattering explosion. Yin Shishir and Mu Yichen would also be mercilessly reduced to ashes, their flesh and blood splattering everywhere. Perhaps his words were just to trick him. There was no explosive device or remote control device. His goal was to trick him into using him as a hostage. He knew very well that the person who wanted his life this time was Muyaja. To Muyaja, Yin Tianyu was more valuable as a hostage than Mu Linfeng. Director Yin, calm down. Don't be nervous. Perhaps he's just saying that to trick you. Yu Yu sucked in a deep breath of cold air and said in a low voice, I suspect so too. He was so smart. How could he not have thought of this? His concern made him confused. Mu Lianjue was making use of this opportunity. As the saying went, all was fair in war. The man might be using an illusion to confuse him to achieve his goal. Alas, he did not dare to do so. He did not dare to gamble with Yin Shishir and Mu Yichen's lives. No one dared to guarantee, nor was anyone clear, what the hell was the button he was holding tightly in his hand at this moment. Perhaps nothing would happen if he pressed it. Perhaps, as he said, he would really lose his mother and brother forever if he pressed it. Yu Yu had always been bold and unconventional, but at this moment, he had really lost his courage. It was very difficult for him to gamble with Yin Shishir and Mu Yichen's lives. Even so, despite his anxiety, he maintained a calm expression as he scrutinized the man unblinkingly. His face showed no signs of wavering as he carefully scrutinized the man, trying hard to find any suspicious signs on his face. What? You don't believe me? Do you really think I'm coaxing you? If you don't believe me, why don't you give it a try? Mu Lianjue said as he raised the control button in his hand and pretended to press it. Yu finally could not hold himself back and raised his voice to stop him. Wait! Mu Lianjue's lips curled into a triumphant smirk the moment he said that. Then come over here. Be good and come to me. Mu Lianjue was like an evil demon as he patiently enticed him. Come here, good boy, come to me. Yu pursed his lips tightly. He had just taken a step forward when Lisa suddenly blocked his path. He's lying to you. Lisa lowered her voice and stared at him with a pair of cold eyes. Her face was alarmed. Don't go over. Move aside. Yu smiled elegantly. Lisa, move aside. I can't let you take the risk. Lisa's tone was stiff, but she had no intention of giving in. She couldn't just watch him throw his life away. Chapter 1377. Who knew what earth-shattering things he would do in a fit of hysteria? Likewise, I don't dare to take the risk. I can't let Mommy and Big Brother be in danger. Yu paused and looked at her. Don't worry, you're on standby at any time. I know what to do. No. Lisa was adamant to the end. She was certain that the so-called explosive device in the man's hand was just an empty shell that did not work at all. It was just a last-ditch effort. He was making use of Yu's weakness. He knew that the child was eager to protect his mother, and would not watch her fall into danger. Yu calmly asked, then what if it's real? What if it was really an explosive device if he pressed it? Lisa choked all of a sudden. Vermilion Bird's eyes flickered as she whispered in his ear. Sir, we have a sniper 100 meters away on standby. It's too late. Yu knitted his brows. The sniper crouched 100 meters away on standby. However, he would not act rashly if he did not receive the order to shoot. If he were to give the order now, it would only alert the enemy. If Mu Lianjue wanted to kill him before he could press the button with the intention of perishing together, there would be an accident. He could not condone even a 1 in a million accident. I'll give you 3 seconds. He gave his ultimatum and started counting down. 1. Master Yu. Lisa did not back down. Yu stared into her eyes and said word by word. Get out of my way. 2. Lisa fiercely bit her lips, and then suddenly rubbed her messy forehead, and unwillingly moved out of the way. 3. Mu Lianjue raised the button in his hand high in the air. Yu suddenly raised his voice. Fourth great uncle, let's negotiate. I don't have the patience to negotiate with you, he said coldly. Yu smiled. Fourth great uncle, I'm willing to be your hostage now, but don't you dare play any tricks. Otherwise I don't have the patience either. The man pondered for a moment and then smiled sinisterly. Fine. I'm warning you though. Don't play any tricks. Otherwise, we'll just perish together. Yu smiled. With your words, how can I dare to play any tricks? After saying that, he raised his arrogant chin and walked towards him. Mu Lianjue looked at him greedily, as if he was a malicious spirit standing at the mouth of purgatory, and showing his ugly face. Mu Linfeng's face's expression. Bees. How could this child have such extraordinary courage? In order to protect his beloved family, he actually didn't hesitate to put himself in danger. Putting everything else aside, just this point alone made him admire him from the bottom of his heart. To be simple. It seemed that he had still underestimated this child. While he was still in a daze, Yu walked up to Mu Lianjue. The latter grabbed him by the collar and dragged him to his side. At the same time, he kicked Mu Linfeng out. Caught off guard, Mu Linfeng fell to the ground in a wretched state, landing on his face like a dog in the mud. Mu Lianjue grabbed Yu's throat with one hand. In an instant, all the members of Mercenary Paradise were on alert. They stared at Mu Lianjue vigilantly and were on standby at any time. Chapter 1378. Even Mu Linfeng felt ashamed of himself when he saw her composed expression. Aren't you afraid? Mu Lianjue narrowed his eyes and gripped his neck hard. Yu's body was curvaceous, and his neck, in particular, was as elegant and charming as a swan. Such a beautiful neck, it should be a heart-wrenching thing to break, right? He said viciously. As long as I exert more strength, hee. You won't be able to keep your life. Are you really not afraid? You can try. Yu smiled elegantly, completely unfazed by his threat. I want to live, and so do you. What value do I have to you if I die? Mu Lianjue cocked a brow and sneered, his eyes turning more ruthless. You're right. You're a smart child. However, if anything happens to me tonight, you won't be able to leave this place alive, either. Fourth granduncle, since I'm in your hands now, you should get rid of that device in your hand. Don't be an eyesore. Yu sneered, his face full of disgust. As soon as he said that, Mu Lianjue's eyes darkened. He raised the small device in his hand and smashed it to the ground, shattering it into pieces. Yu's eyes darkened. He was startled for a moment, but in the next moment, a look of understanding flashed across his eyes. It seemed that, as he had expected, the device in Mu Lianjue's hand was just a smokescreen to lure him. It was useless. What explosive device? It was just nonsense. Vermilion Bird stood at the side and watched as Mu Lianjue smashed the device to the ground. She heaved a sigh of relief when she saw that it was just a useless component. It was a false alarm. Yu was relieved too. The rock in his heart finally fell to the ground. His face remained expressionless as he stared at the device he had smashed to pieces on the ground. Behind him, Mu Lianjue shouted smugly, Hee. This is just a simple mechanical device. It's useless. It's just a toy to scare a child. How could you believe it? I thought that a 7-year-old child could be smart, but it seems that this is all there is to it. Vermilion Bird choked when she heard that. She tried her best to stifle her laughter, and pursed her lips, pretending to be cool. Lisa, who was standing at the side, looked even colder and more disdainful. Yu's eyes shone brightly. Is that so? Fourth granduncle, you lied to me that it's an explosive device, and I really believed it. How naughty. To lie to a child's face. Mu Lianjue's smile was tinged with pleasure as he gripped the boy's neck. He unscrupulously enjoyed the latter's feigned weakness and helplessness. His wrinkled fingers traced the boy's cheeks before he grabbed the gun and pressed the muzzle against the latter's temple. His gaze was sinister and vicious. Yu sneered inwardly. He was not afraid of tigers, but he was not a calf. He was the king of beasts. Chapter 1379. Fourth granduncle, you adults are so bad. How could you bully a child? How pitiful that I actually believed you. Now that I'm in your hands, I'm so angry. He mewed like a little lamb and complained aggrievedly. For some reason, Yu's words made Vermilion Bird's hair stand on end. Yu was so scary. He was clearly the worst and most scheming one. On the surface, he was being held hostage and controlled by Mu Lianjue. But what about it? Yu looked weak on the surface, but in reality, he had sharp claws and fangs hidden behind his back. Poor Mu Lianjue. Did he really think that he had the upper hand in this situation? Yin Tianyu merely took pity on him and wanted to play along with him. When he confirmed that the device was just an ordinary one, he secretly made a hand gesture to it. Vermilion Bird secretly sent out a signal, but it was still unable to kill the man on the spot. The situation was in a stalemate because he had a gun in his hand. Vermilion Bird planned to stall for time and kill the man the moment he let his guard down. Mu Lianjue was completely unaware of Yu's scheme and the situation he was in. He was still extremely pleased with himself. A child is indeed a child. You actually believed me with just a few words. Still, you're really bold to barge into the tiger's den. Fourth granduncle, do you dare to kill me? Yu smiled provocatively as his eyes turned cold. Do you dare to hurt a single strand of my hair? Why not? Mu Lianjue pinched his cheeks viciously. You can't die yet though. I'll spare your life before you cover my escape. Fourth granduncle, let me give you a piece of advice. Don't struggle anymore. You've lost. Accept your fate. Yu gave him an ultimatum out of pity. Just as he said that, not far away, two dazzling lights suddenly appeared. They were slowly approaching the southern entrance. Everyone present was on high alert. Vermilion Bird followed the light and saw an Audi A8 approaching from afar. She especially noticed that this car had a J background license plate. Presumably, its origin was not simple. Behind the Audi A8, there were several other cars. The Audi A8 stopped steadily at the south entrance. Everyone looked over. In his line of sight, a tall and slender figure slowly stepped out of the car. Muyaja stepped out of the car and stood tall and straight. His body was tall and slender. Invisibly, an awe-inspiring aura spread out in an instant. His body exuded a very terrifying aura. This kind of aura was enough to make anyone feel fear. When Yu saw him, she was confused at first. She did not understand why he was here. When Muyaja saw Yu, he was stunned. He did not expect to see such a strange situation when he rushed over. Why was he here? Both father and son had the same question almost at the same time. Daddy, why are you here? Yu was the first to ask with a look of astonishment. Just as he opened his mouth, Mu Lianjue grabbed him by the throat and roared, "Shut up!" Muyaja's arrival made him raise his guard. Yu could not hide his shock despite being choked. Chapter 1380. He cursed inwardly in his heart and connected the dots. A white light flashed in his mind, and he suddenly suspected that Vice Captain Zhou's mercenary group had been sent by Daddy. If that was the case, did it not mean that he had made a huge mistake? He thought that Mu Lianjue was about to be smuggled out of the country, so he rushed over to kidnap him. He did not expect that the father and son would bump into each other. Muyaja, who had obviously guessed this, was slightly taken aback. He was indeed his son. He actually thought of the same thing as him. Vermilion Bird broke out in cold sweat as well. What was going on? It turned out that the vice captain was Muyaja's men. They had been busy all day, but they did not expect him to be one of them. Vermilion Bird could not help glancing at the vice captain. The latter also reacted and looked at him pitifully. There was a hint of sympathy in their eyes. It turned out that he was one of them. Yu's face darkened for a moment. Daddy, what a coincidence. Muyaja glanced at Vermilion Bird and then at the calm Yu. At first, he was a little alarmed. After all, the sight of Yu with a gun pointed at his son's temple was a little nerve-wracking. However, when he caught a glimpse of Yu's sinister smile and the calm Vermilion Bird, he knew that this was Yu's wicked game. Thus, he heaved a sigh of relief. He smiled and could not help but tease. My good son, it's already so late. What are you doing here instead of sleeping at home? Yu replied innocently, I want to help Daddy catch the bad guys. Muyaja was delighted by his son's reply. My good son is so filial. Of course. It's only right for a son to be filial to his father. Yu said matter-of-factly. Mu Lianjue's face darkened. The father-son pair was echoing each other, clearly ignoring his deterrence. Shut up, all of you. Do you think this is child's play? Mu Lianjue found the scene before him very strange. The father and son teased each other without a trace of nervousness. Yu did not look afraid at all. The gun was still pointed at his forehead. Was he not afraid? Was he not afraid of death, or was he not afraid of being shot? Even if he wasn't afraid of him shooting, wasn't he afraid that the gun would go off accidentally? Please. Yu was clearly his hostage, but why did he feel like he was the trapped beast? Can't you be more serious? He was the one who kidnapped Yu. Why did he feel like he was in deep trouble? Mu Linfeng was also confused. The conversation between the father and son was too relaxed and leisurely, so much so that there wasn't even the slightest sense of danger in the current situation. Shut up. Mu Lianjue could not take it anymore. Are you done? Prepare a car for me. Get the car ready. Yu looked up with a smile and said considerately, I'll prepare a hearse for you. Do you want it? Mu Lianjue was flabbergasted. Fourth uncle, have you had enough? Let me go if you're done. I want to go home and sleep. I'm so sleepy. Yu even yawned sleepily after saying that. Are you really not afraid of death? Mu Lianjue quickly loaded the gun, put his finger on the trigger, and pointed it at his temple. Do you believe that I won't shoot your head off right now? Mu Lianjue had just raised his hand when a bullet pierced through the air from a distance with a swoosh, piercing through his wrist. Mu Linfeng was stunned. Ah. Chapter 1381. Mu Lianjue let out a muffled groan. The bullet came from a long-range sniper rifle 100 meters away. Despite the distance, the bullet's lethality was shocking. When it pierced through his wrist, it caused explosive damage and caused his palm to burst open. Fresh blood and flesh splattered everywhere. Yu only felt a loud explosion above his head. After a buzzing sound, he temporarily lost his hearing. Mu Lianjue could only feel the bullet penetrating his wrist. Along with the excruciating pain of broken bones, his arm went numb and he lost all feeling in it. His grip loosened, and the pistol in his hand fell to the ground. Vermilion Bird strode forward and kicked the pistol several meters away with the tip of her foot. She then carried Yu and brought him to safety. Whoosh! Another sound of a bullet piercing through the air was heard. Mu Lianjue's abdomen was mercilessly penetrated by a bullet once more. At this moment, he was practically surrounded by the long-range snipers. A total of 5 snipers were aiming at him. If he made the slightest move that was detrimental to Yu, he would be shot on the spot. Mu Lianjue groaned in pain. At that moment, he felt as if his entire body had lost its temperature. An uncontrollable chill rose from the soles of his feet, swept across his spine, and attacked his heart. It was so cold that it made one's heart numb. There seemed to be a huge force exploding in the depths of his flesh and blood where the bullet had penetrated his abdomen. At first, he only felt numbness, a hollow numbness. Soon after, he felt an intense burning sensation around his wound. Then he felt an endless cycle of radioactive pain. The burning sensation hit his heart directly, as if he was being set ablaze in a vast expanse of land. Following that, something sticky and viscous flowed out from the wound and stained his clothes like a blooming flower. Mu Lianjue's eyes widened in disbelief. Everything happened so suddenly that he was not prepared for it at all. He only felt that the world before him had turned dark. He first wiped his wound with his hand. When he raised his hand, his palm was already red. Was it blood? He didn't hear any gunshots at all. He only felt the sound of air being sliced through from behind him. Then he was shot. Could it be that there was a sniper lying in ambush in the distance? Mu Lianjue was stunned. For a moment, he was jittery and paranoid. He abruptly turned around and tightly clutched his bleeding wound. His eyes were completely red, as if they were about to burst. However, when he saw the cold expression on Mu Yaja's face and Yu's smile, he suddenly understood everything. As it turned out, he had nowhere to run. As it turned out, he was being played like a monkey. This brat had clearly calculated everything. Just now, he had displayed such a cowardly appearance in front of him. He was simply playing the fool in front of him. Bastard! Bastard! Mu Lianjue cursed in anger. Be asterisk starred. I was actually tricked by you, you bastard. Yu looked at him coldly, then smiled deeply and said elegantly, "Fourth uncle, you're stupid. With your skills, I don't even want to play with you. How boring." With that, he nonchalantly opened his palm with a cold face. Vermilion Bird, give it to me. Chapter 1382. Yu held the gun that Vermilion Bird had passed to him. It was a Desert Eagle. The gun's body was a little heavy, but one should not underestimate it. The Desert Eagle was powerful to begin with. This pistol used high-quality ammunition, and the bullets had explosive power. He fiddled with it for a while. Previously, he had Vermilion Bird teach him some marksmanship. It was not because of anything else, but because after the recent series of events, he knew that he had to learn some self-protection methods. This was his character. He did not like to rely on others for everything. He was too weak. If not for Xiao Yichen and Lisa's protection, it would be difficult for him to protect himself. Hence, he had to learn how to protect himself and master the means to do so. In the past 2 days, he had been working hard to learn marksmanship from Vermilion Bird. Vermilion Bird was surprised to find that he was quite talented in marksmanship. He grasped it very quickly and learned how to load and shoot. Although his accuracy was not precise, it was still very high, which surprised her. Mu Yaja watched him pick up the gun and load it skillfully. Then he raised his wrist and aimed the black muzzle at Mu Lianjue. Be it the way he held the gun or his posture, everything was very professional. This little guy secretly learned how to shoot behind his back. While Mu Yaja was surprised, he also felt impressed. Seeing him take out a gun, Mu Lianjue's face turned pale, and his lips trembled violently. What are you doing? I've learned some marksmanship some time ago. What's more frustrating is that there's no one to practice with me though. With that, Yu's lips curled up. Fourth granduncle, can you practice with me? No. No. His face turned pale as he turned around abruptly and tried to run away. Without another word, Yu pulled the trigger and fired 2 shots at his hind legs. Mu Lianjue let out a blood-curdling scream as he staggered to the ground. His shrill scream pierced the silence of the night and spread far and wide along the southern entrance of the vast highway. However, it soon dissipated into the biting cold wind. These 2 shots are for Uncle Zhao. If not for Mu Lianjue's assassins, Uncle Zhao would not have died that day. This was Mu Lianjue's evil debt. He had to avenge the Zhao clan. With that, Yu fired again. 2 more shots rang out. Mu Lianjue let out another blood-curdling scream as he clutched his wounded knee in pain. His whole body twitched violently as he rolled around on the ground in pain. Mu Yaja glanced at his son. At this moment, Yu was standing in the bone-chilling night breeze. His back was straight and his entire body was cold. He turned sideways. His black hair was slightly messy in the evening breeze, brushing against his cheeks and intertwining with his thick eyelashes. Her originally snow-white and cute face was incomparably deep. Her pair of gloomy and dark eyes seemed to be covered in ice and snow, without any warmth. His marksmanship was standard. When he fired, his face was cold and emotionless, as if it were just a routine. Even when he heard Mu Lianjue's screams, he did not move at all. He blinked as if he was already numb to death. He appeared so callous. His heart was filled with mixed feelings. In fact, he was not so willing to let Yu come into contact with such dark things too early. Chapter 1383. However, perhaps because he had experienced too many frightening things, Mu Yaja felt that it was time for him to come into contact with these things. Back then, when he arranged for Xiao Yichen to be sent to the army for training, he was met with opposition. However, he still threw the little fellow into the special training camp without hesitation, just so that he could strengthen his physique to a greater extent and train him. Now Xiao Yichen proved that his choice back then was not wrong. This world had always been one where the strong preyed on the weak, and the weak were eliminated. The strong were the only ones who had the right to set the rules of this world. Although the child was young, as his son, perhaps it was not a bad thing for him to come into contact with this side of things early on. Just like Xiao Yichen, even though his childhood was not accompanied by pain and suffering like other children, reality had proven that he had already become a strong person. Yu fired again. Bang. Bang. 2 shots landed on one of Mu Lianjue's legs. Blood splattered and shattered. Mu Lianjue, however, was in so much pain that he was almost numb. He did not even have the strength to cry out in pain. His body convulsed and he groaned a few times. He almost blacked out and fainted. Yu's pair of clear and bright eyes were now dyed red with hatred. When he thought of the suffering this man had caused his mommy and Xiao Yichen, he could not wait to crush him. He walked over, aimed at Mu Lianjue's waist, and fired another shot. This time, blood splattered on his face. A trace of heat was on his cheeks, but he did not seem to feel it. His handsome eyes narrowed as he coldly pursed his lips. Mu Lianjue had been shot several times. As he continued to bleed, his body temperature became colder and colder. Right now, he was hoping that Yu would give him a quick and painless death. However, Yu clearly did not want to give him a quick death with one shot. Instead, he deliberately inflicted the greatest pain on him. Thus, he mercilessly shot at the non-fatal parts of his body. He looked more like he was venting the resentment in his heart. Yu lowered his gaze with a murderous look. Those bullets landed squarely on Mu Lianjue's body. It was so painful that his entire body was almost numb. His mind buzzed and he kept losing blood. On one hand, his body felt cold because of the loss of body temperature. On the other hand, his wounds were scalded by the many bullets, and the burning pain was transmitted. Ice and fire. Bang. 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 Yu fired another 8 shots consecutively, but each bullet perfectly avoided the man's vitals. Mu Lianjue endured the pain, feeling as though he was better off dead than alive. This was the first time he had seen such a terrifying child. His eyes were bloodshot and filled with hatred. He was shot many times, but none of the bullets were fatal. For a while, He was struggling at death's door, which made him wish he was dead. You. Mu Lianjue opened his mouth in a pleading tone. You. Instead of being tormented by him like this, he might as well die a quick death. Fourth granduncle, I haven't had my fill yet. How can I let you die like this? Yu Yu's tone was languid and nonchalant. After saying that, he lifted his leg and stomped on the wound on his abdomen. Blood gushed out from the wound the moment he stomped on it. Ugh,